What is up?
Have XM.
Go to my YouTube channel. Hey guys, how's it going? Don, Travis. Yep, the pasta mic video is tomorrow. Everybody check out the pasta mic video. Normalizing atheism. There we go. That'll work. But hey, philosopher poet, how's it going? Oh, I should make you you add moderator. Philosopher poet moderator added. Sully knows slightly more guitar theory than me. I'll admit it for sure. Will this show the trends? What do you mean by trends? Like the stuff from the last one? Halo 2 podcast. That game came out like 2 decades ago. Why is there a Halo 2 podcast? Like a Halo 10 podcast? All right, but let's jump right in. Ha 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 ha.
Hello, YouTube.
This is actually the Kane B video, so I'm just using it because I like his commentary. I want to comment on his commentary. It's very interesting. Let's go.
So the results of the 2020 PhilPapers survey have been officially released, and I thought I would do a video in which I express my views about them, because why not?
I'll probably mention a few of the changes, but I don't think I'll go through all the changes. Most of them are the same. There's pretty much no difference. They're about the same. There's very, very small differences, like atheism went down slightly because there were more options in the question, but there's still more atheists, so it actually kind of went up in a way, but like by a few percent. So there's not really a big difference.
That might be kind of fun. I'm going to react to the PhilPapers survey. This is my first reaction video.
Reaction videos.
So yeah, maybe this is going to be a new thing for me, because this is what you all want, isn't it? I've seen the demographics of my channel, and you're all in your 20s. You're all the youth, and this is what the youth.
How does he get so lucky? Like all of my people are like ancient. Like all you guys are like 40, and 30, and 40. How do you get all the young youth 20s?
They want memes and react videos. So I'm doing a react video. Okay. So, well, I don't have much to say about this first one. That's basically the same.
So this one, a priori knowledge, a priori versus a posteriori distinction. The a priori knowledge is things you know about without sense experience. A posteriori is things you know with the sense experience. Is a priori knowledge possible? Is essentially the question. I tend to go with yes. So like, are there things that you can know just by thinking about it? Yes. Like 1 + 1 = 2, A = A, I exist, that kind of stuff. Yes, I believe a priori knowledge is possible. So that means that empiricism is wrong. So empiricism is the position that all true knowledge is only a posteriori, and you can't get any knowledge from a priori rationalism stuff. If a priori knowledge is possible, then empiricism is technically kind of wrong. This is why I'm not an empiricist, because I think a priori knowledge is correct, and you can gain knowledge without empirical verification of sense experience.
As it was in the previous survey, as I
Platonism,
think, is the question on abstract objects. I think that's very similar to the one on the previous survey. Actually, one thing I will say about this, which is kind of interesting, is that, as we will see as we go through this, philosophers seem to be leaning in a realist direction in many contexts.
Go science.
So certainly when it comes to morality, there are a whole load of moral realists out there. And actually, even with aesthetic value, as you can see on this next question, it's about 50-50. So there's a lot of people who buy realism about aesthetic value. Now, realism about abstract objects, again, it's sort of split down the middle. But given the sort of realist inclinations that we see in other contexts, I am a little bit surprised that Platonism here is only on about 38%. Just because, it strikes me that the case for realism about, say, mathematical entities is actually much stronger than the case for moral realism. And there's a couple of reasons for that.
Well, so I actually disagree with Kane here. I think that it makes perfect sense why Platonism is so low. Like, Platonism has a problem of the interaction problem. How do the Platonic objects interact with anything? Or do they interact with anything? Whereas moral realism is like, yeah, if morality exists, it can interact with our minds just fine. We obviously interact with them in some way. So I think there's obviously a much stronger pull towards moral intuitionism, where we have moral intuitions that we can feel and interact with, than to like Platonic objects. Like, Platonic objects don't really make a lot of sense. And so it makes sense that most philosophers reject Platonic objects, whereas morality, most philosophers accept morality, since there's a much stronger, more intuitional pull towards morality. And Platonic objects are essentially something we have to come to later. It's something that people thought up. It's not like intuitive to every human being. And so, but the fact that Platonic objects are some kind of post hoc thing that we come up with, as opposed to like something we inherently know about or inherently feel as an intuition, it makes sense that Platonism is not really as accepted as moral realism.
So the first thing is that one of the main motivations for anti-realism is the thought that when we make moral claims, that seems to be connected to...
I agree, Sully. Nominalism about universals, there doesn't really need to be any universals. I think universals are just abstract labels we give to things, and we can just apply it to a lot of stuff in the universe. There's not like an absolute universal principle that actually exists anywhere. I'd say the same with numbers and abstract objects.
Our sentiments, our passions, right? Like morality is something that moves us. It has that kind of motivational force to it, and it seems like it is appealing to emotional dispositions, and so that's something that obviously inspires non-cognitivist analysis of ethics. So that when somebody says abortion is wrong, well, really they're just expressing something more like abortion boo, right? That kind of view is founded on this idea that morality is a product of the passions, right? So we're not really even trying to describe mind-independent facts. We're expressing our values. And the point is that kind of approach seems totally implausible in the case of mathematics. I mean, when somebody says that like 1 + 1 = 2, to give a very simple example, but when people make mathematical claims, there doesn't really seem to be any plausible argument that they're just expressing their emotions or anything.
Well, that's true. So his argument here is that the criticism against moral realism is that, well, you're just expressing your emotions. So it's not really, there's no real objective morality there. And that same criticism can't be levied against abstract objects like your mathematical truths or triangles or whatever. Well, and while this is the case, there are other objections to the mathematical abstract truths that apply to them but don't apply to moral truths. Like, for example, you don't need math. You don't need math to exist at all. Math can just be a language humans made up to describe the way stuff operates in reality without any abstract existing objects. And so the fact that you can describe everything in the universe without any mathematical objects is kind of the point. Like, you don't need this to be there. It doesn't need to exist. It could just be a language and nothing more. And there could just be some features of reality that we describe with numbers, but numbers don't actually do anything. Whereas morality seems to do something. It seems to have an effect. Even if it's just through our emotions, it has an effect on stuff. And so the fact that it has an effect and it's intuitive to us seems to give it more weight and more reason to think it's more objective than abstract objects.
Along those lines. So one of the main motivations that for moral anti-realism just doesn't apply in the case of mathematics. The other thing is that with mathematical entities, and I think actually quite a few other abstract objects, there's a very intuitive case for a sort of indispensability argument appealing to the way in which these entities are quantified over in our best scientific theories. So, science is saturated with mathematics, right? Our best theories of how the world works quantify over mathematical entities. It's like they say that there is the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in science. So if you're attracted to scientific realism, if you think that scientific theories provide true descriptions of reality, and many philosophers do think that, then, you've got a pretty good case, at least a prima facie argument that can similarly apply to mathematical entities and that would, support a Platonist view. In the case of morality, yes, you can make that kind of argument. Like, there have been people who have argued that moral properties are similarly indispensable to our best theory of the world, but that's a lot more strained. Like, that's a much more difficult argument to make. The premise, the indispensability premise, is far less intuitively appealing in the case of moral properties than it is in the case of mathematical entities.
Well, this is again where I disagree. I think it's easier to dispense with math as being a real thing than it is to dispense with morality as being a real thing. I think it's much easier to say that, no, math is just a language we made up to describe the way reality is, and there's no actually existing mathematics there. So it's much easier to just dismiss math as being an existing thing than it is to dismiss morality as being an existing thing.
So, given that there are so many philosophers who are attracted to, like, scientific realism, physicalism, naturalism, all that, again,
yay, science.
There's at least prima facie plausible argument for the indispensability of mathematical entities that doesn't seem to apply to the case of morality. So for these reasons, you'd expect that, I think that the case for mathematical realism, the case for Platonism, is much stronger than the case for moral realism.
I actually take that argument as essentially the argument that, you need God. You need God to be able to have the intelligibility of stuff, whatever, rational intelligibility. God is the preconditions of rational intelligibility. It's the same kind of argument. So to say that math is indispensable is essentially to say God is indispensable. It's no difference. But I don't find that argument to be very compelling or useful in any way. Whereas, since again, morality is something that we directly experience, it is far more compelling to people to think it's a real thing, since it is a phenomenon. Like, if we all see a mirage in the distance, even if it's a mirage, the fact that we see it and we all see it gives it more credence than some hypothetical that's just in our heads to post hoc explain stuff.
Philosophers apparently, as a group, do not agree. Okay then, yeah. Let's see if there's anything to say about these other.
Wait, why is he skipping them? He skips them. All right, so.
Yeah, let's see if there's anything to say about these.
So this one's really interesting. Aesthetic value. I was really surprised by this one. The fact that most philosophers, or the majority, 43%, think that aesthetic value is objective. Now, I'm totally on the firm camp. Aesthetic value is subjective. It's just, we make up beauty, we make up prettiness. There's no objective prettiness to there. I don't really know how aesthetic value could be objective. I mean, you could make the same argument that I do for morality, say it's some kind of undiscovered law of nature, I guess, but I don't really see much of a pattern in transitions. I don't see a aesthetic progress as much as I do moral progress. Moral progress seems to make sense. We see as time goes on, there's a specific pattern in the way morality develops, but I don't see that in the case with aesthetic value. Aesthetic value changes all the time. There's a new fad, new fashion, new art. Modern art is the most garbage art ever, objectively. So I guess that would be kind of concede the point. There must be, for modern art to be objectively garbage, there must be aesthetic value. That's probably the strongest argument for aesthetic objectivism. For modern art to be crap objectively, there must be an objective standard to show that it's crap. But other than that, I don't see as strong an argument for aesthetic value as I do for moral objectivism, because aesthetic value doesn't have a consistent pattern of change over time, whereas morality does seem to have a consistent pattern of change over time. So I don't understand why so many philosophers accept aesthetic value as being objective. It doesn't quite make sense to me. Yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beer holder, correct. How is morality objective but comedy subjective? Well, I think, again, comedy, would be the same thing as aesthetic value, because there's not a clear pattern to the change. It changes randomly based on other things, but there's no I I don't see a clear pattern in the change to comedy. So it doesn't seem to be like there's a comedy progress, like there's a moral progress. So even though we have intuitions of all these things, we have intuitions of aesthetic value, we have intuitions of comedy, we have intuitions of moral value, there's an extra step in morality, which is what separates it separates from the others, which is that there's this moral progress thing. There seems to be a clear pattern to the way in which it's changing over time.
Oh yes, the aim of
Euthyphro dilemma. If you want me to react, put it on the vid you want debunked list, and I'll get to that one. Or you could just, whenever I do the next vid you want debunked, you can just super chat and remind me, and I'll do it then.
philosophy. Now this was quite an interesting one, because for this question you could select multiple options, and in light of that, I'm actually a bit surprised that goodness justice is only on 22%. In fact, I mean, even like truth knowledge is only on 42%, and you know that's pretty low. Like only 42% of philosophers think the aim of philosophy is truth/knowledge. You'd think it would be higher than that. I mean, I should say that my own view on this is I just don't think it makes sense to talk about the aim of philosophy at all. Right?
Oh, math makes progress. I agree with that, Sully. I agree that math makes progress and that it better describes reality, but I don't think like the math, I mean, because math itself can't make progress. Math is just better at describing reality than other maths. It's not like the math itself is making progress.
Right. I think that we can attribute aims to particular individuals. We can attribute aims to sort of tightly knit research groups, perhaps. But the idea that a whole field of inquiry is going to have an aim or some particular set of aims seems kind of absurd to me. But if you take seriously the notion of the aim of philosophy, you know, you would think that there would be more than 22% of people selecting goodness justice. Well, I guess actually it's closer to 23%. But still, you'd think there'd be more than, 23% of people selecting goodness/justice.
I totally disagree here. I think that philosophy is like science. It's a tool that we use to do something. And so the purpose of philosophy is like asking, well, why would you study philosophy? What would be the purpose in studying philosophy? And for most people, it's not going to be morality. Most people don't try to get their morals from studying philosophy. They usually have their own moral values and then post hoc try to justify those with other reasoning. So the reason people try, like, deliberately learn philosophy is usually like epistemic, like epistemology. I want to know truth and knowledge. Usually has nothing to do with ontology. Like we get no knowledge of ontology from philosophy. It's a total waste of time, except for like religious people try to post hoc justify it that way. So you don't get into philosophy to try to learn ontology. It's pretty much exclusively knowledge-based reason. You want to understand something better. You want to learn truth and knowledge better. Wisdom. Yeah, those three answers make a lot of sense. Happiness. Yeah, very few people get into philosophy for happiness. It is not a good field to go into for happiness. I would suggest something that pays better. But yeah, goodness and justice as a field of like ethics, there's definitely a demographic of people who would go into ethics, but it's not the primary reason. I mean, I can totally understand why most philosophers will land on, yeah, this is about knowledge, understanding, wisdom kind of stuff. That makes sense to me. I would definitely answer in those top three. Let me know how you guys would answer these questions. Post your answers in the comments. Answer all the questions. Play along.
Because there are whole fields of philosophy, there are whole areas of philosophical inquiry that are plausibly interpreted as having that as an aim. Ethics and political philosophy seem to be directed towards that goal. At least if it makes sense to talk about any field of inquiry as having an aim, it surely makes sense to talk of ethics as having the aim of goodness/justice. So this was a little bit surprising. I mean,
Appreciate it. Hashtag TjumpMProgress. I will pretend that makes sense to me. I don't know.
Not surprising that most philosophers selected epistemic aims, like understanding truth/knowledge, but I would have thought that more would go for goodness, justice, especially given how many moral realists there are, as we will see. Yeah.
Analytic synthetic distinction. This is a really interesting one, especially because the analytic synthetic distinction was pretty harshly critiqued by Quine as two dogmas of empiricism. So you'd expect that, given how strong the criticism is treated in many fields, that the rejection of the analytic synthetic distinction would actually be the majority. So it's really surprising that most philosophers accept the analytic synthetic distinction as opposed to rejecting it because Quine was so influential, and this is such a well-known paper, but most philosophers just don't accept it. Omnorimi. Did I hear that Dillahuntty is dating Arden? That's cool. I think I heard someone mention that. It's fine by me. More power to him.
Yeah. So eating animals. Now
He just skipped it. He skipped the analytic synthetic distinction. That was a really, really good one. Like,
this was another question that was not on the original survey. I think these are pretty much the results I would have expected.
Eating animals and animal products. Is it permissible to eat animals and or animal products in ordinary circumstances? Omnivorism, yes and yes. Veganism, vegetarianism, no and yes. Veganism, no and no. I think the way this question is phrased is very confusing because it conflates morality and pragmatism. Like, I think those are two things that we should keep very separate. We should keep morality, like as in the objective right and wrong answer, as separate from what we pragmatically have to do. I think that's the advantage of my morality, is that I separate those two things, whereas most don't, which is a problem. So if we separate the pragmatic from the objective morality, then the answer is objectively veganism is correct. So no and no. It's totally wrong to kill animals for our survival. It's never a moral thing to do, but it is pragmatic. So from a pragmatic standpoint, omnivorism makes sense, even though from a moral standpoint, veganism is the correct answer.
So the case for veganism or vegetarianism is, from the point of view of most conventional moral frameworks, absolutely overwhelming. Like, it is pretty much a slam dunk case. Again, from most conventional moral frameworks. And philosophers are not perfect, but they are better than most people at following the arguments where they lead.
That's funny. Better than most people.
On the other hand, they're not perfect, right? Like, they're not perfect, so it's...
Kagito wants me to put the link in the comments. God damn it. I don't even know if I have the link. I think Philosophopoet sent me the link in Facebook, so I have it there. Let's go get the link. I don't like updating the freaking Garbo. All right, let's see. Philosophopoet. There we go. Loading. Still loading. There we go. Scroll up. There we go. There it is. No, that's his paper. So it's probably listed in his on the bottom somewhere.
Absolutely.
There it is. Found it. All right, close. Post link there. Boom. There you go. Posted it in the what's it? The thingy. All right. So if you guys can see that, you can copy it, add it to the comments. I'll pin it if it's in the comments. I don't think I can add a comment right now because it's live, but there we go. There's the link for people who want the link.
It's not surprising that even so, there's still a majority favouring omnivorism. Actually, I think I selected omnivorism, but like, I don't adopt anything like a conventional moral framework, so of course. But yeah, I mean... give it another 10 years, it'll probably be like another 10% lower for omnivorism or something like that. The times are changing on this one. Actually, it'd be interesting to look at the differences in age group on that question, which you can do, but I'm not going to do right now. If I had planned this out more carefully, I would have already done that and would have that information, but I did not. So... Okay, experience machine. There's another new question.
Let's go back.
In age group on that question, which you can do, but I'm not going to do right now.
Epistemic justification, internalism versus externalism. So externalism, science for the win. Internalism, more like rationalism kind of a stuff. Definitely I'm leading the more externalism. That's more science wins. Thank you, science.
If I had planned this out more carefully, I would have already done that and would have that information, but I did not. So, um, okay.
So experience machine is the Robert Nozick's argument that if hedonism is true and we should just do whatever makes us happy, then the best thing to do would be to upload all of our consciousness to a machine, to like a matrix or whatever that just gives us all perfect experiences. So happiness experience machine maker thingy. That's what the experience machine is.
Experience machine, this is another new question. Not surprising. I don't really have much to say about this one. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I would enter, but... the footbridge question. This is very amusing. It's not... We've already done that and would have that information. We've already done to say about this one. So...
So the experience machine, it's an interesting one. Like, I think the argument of why you would not want to go into an experience machine is like loneliness. You'd want to be with other real human beings rather than AIs. So if you could go into an experience machine and be with other people, I think more people would go towards yes. Especially if you could upload your consciousness and then go in and out whenever you wanted to. I think definitely more people would say yes. But just being locked in an experience machine by yourself for eternity, I think, yeah, that's definitely not appealing. So I think the question should be expanded to be more something like, would you be uploaded to an experience machine if you could leave, like upload your consciousness, if you could come out occasionally? And would you spend most of your time in the experience machine, or would you spend most of your time in reality? And given that you could definitely, in the experience machine, spend time with more people, other people, I think that would be a more comprehensive question, because the idea of just going into an experience machine and being alone and being unable to escape would be definitely unappealing to people, but doesn't really get to the point of the question, which is more about what matters. Is it more important to be a part of the real world, or is it more important to be in a place where you can control happiness?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would enter, but
I love this question. External world, idealism, skepticism, or non-skeptical realism. Non-skeptical realism, 80%, just complete dominates everything else. You see that idealism at like 6%. So all of those idealists you see on Discord, their position is about as popular as the rejection of global warming. Like the amount of scientists who reject global warming is the same amount of philosophers who accept idealism. That's how ridiculous the position is. So yeah, idealism is a very, very silly position. Very silly position. It's hilarious.
The footbridge question. This
trolley problem. Pushing man off bridge. Yeah, so this is a variation of the trolley problem where trolley is coming down the tracks. It's going to hit 5 people. Should you push a fat guy off the bridge to stop the track? So this is one of the ones that illustrates the problem of the moral question. Like, if you take the switch question, like if there's a trolley coming down the track and it's going to hit 5 people and there's one person on a different track, should you pull the switch? Most people say yes. Like, yes, we should pull the switch. But then if you change the question slightly and you say, well, there's a fat man on the bridge, and you could push the fat man down, the consequences are the same. So in the case of the fat man, you're pushing the fat man and he falls in front of the track and he stops the train, kills 1, saves 5. In the case of the switch, you pull the switch, it runs over the one person, kills 1, saves 5. So the consequences seem exactly the same on both models, but there seems to be a contradictory intuition we have. Like in the case of the switch, we feel like, yes, flip the switch. It's moral to flip the switch. But in the case of the fat guy, we're like, wait, if I'm pushing the fat guy, that's immoral. And the dilemma outlines that it's hard for most moral models to distinguish between those two. Consequentialism says they're the exact same, so the intuition should be the exact same. This is one of the problems of consequentialism, is because if the consequence is one person dies, saves 5, then both actions should have intuitively the exact same result. You should both flip the switch and push the fat guy. But that is contradicting of our intuitions, because in the switch case, most people want to pull a switch, and in the fat guy case, most people do not want to push the fat guy. And my model answers this question very, very simply. It says any involuntary imposition of will is immoral, and so you pushing the fat guy is you causing a direct action onto the fat guy, which is an imposition of will, and so it makes you feel immoral, whereas you flipping the switch doesn't have a will. So flipping the switch is fine. There's nothing immoral about flipping the switch. And the imposition of will comes from the train not pushing the fat guy. Whereas in the case of pushing the fat guy, there's two impositions of will. You're pushing the fat guy, which is one, and the fat guy gets hit by the train. So in the case of pushing the fat guy, there's two involuntary impositions, one which is directly your fault. And in the case of flipping the switch, there's only one imposition, which is the train hits the one person on the track. So there's my moral model is able to answer this question of why these two, the fat man versus the switch problem, has a difference in the way our intuitions answer it, because in the fat man problem, there's two immoral actions. One is directly caused by you, which is the pushing of the fat guy. And everything else about the system is equal, but that deliberate action by you is an additional evil that you are culpable for. Whereas in the case of the switch, you're not culpable for the train, since it was the train doing the imposition.
Is very amusing. It's not surprising, because if
no self-law, morals are objective. It's not social acceptability.
You accept consequentialist approaches, then, I mean, certainly like on utilitarianism, then yep, it looks like pushing the guy off the footbridge is what you ought to do. But it's, I mean, again, assuming we are like just taking the thought experiment as it's intended, if you accept the hypothetical, then yeah, I mean, you got to push the guy off if you're a if you're a utilitarian or whatever, and there are a lot of utilitarians. So it's not surprising, but it is quite funny. It is quite funny that 22% of people are prepared to just bite the bullet on that particular question.
That is funny. Free will, compatibilism, libertarianism, no free will. Compatibilism gets 60%. That's a large majority. And no free will, that's the interesting one, is that no free will, determinism, strict determinism, is lower than, it's like half as much almost as libertarian free will. That's interesting. So what this shows is that our conception of free will has changed. So our conception of free will is now a kind of neurological determinism. So as long as our brain can act without any external forces, we just call that free will, even though it's totally not. Like, there's nothing about that that's free will. It's just determinism by another name. But people prefer that understanding of free will because it corresponds to something in reality. So this is kind of like what I'm doing in morality, where I'm saying that in the future, our understanding of morality will omit things like oughts, normativity, that kind of stuff. That's the same kind of thing that we see happening here, where in the past we understood free will to be completely free from any kind of outside influences, and now we understand it to be, well, as long as your brain is working without any external forces, it's fine, and then we'll just call that free will, even though you don't get to determine any of the physical forces that designed your brain. So it's very interesting how terminologies change over time and grow, where as we learn more about reality, these past concepts, which referred to nothing about reality, can then be shifted to be applied to something we discover about reality, like compatibilism, free will, universe, atom, other terminologies like those. And I think that the same thing's going to happen in morality. In the future, we're going to see a similar shift to this right here in regards to normativity, where normativity is going to be like the libertarian free will kind of a thing, and this modified morality that I'm presenting is going to be like the compatibilist approach.
The gender question.
Yeah, this one is interesting for sure. So, as you notice, philosophers, 30% of philosophers say gender is biological. This is a completely reasonable position. Now, all of the SJW woke people would be like, oh my God, they're all bigots. They're all racists and transphobes. Like, no, they're really not. They're just taking their usage of language in the way that they find it to be productive and saying gender and sex are synonyms in their use of language. It has nothing to do with bigotry, has nothing to do with transphobes. It's just their preferred use of language. And it's a completely legitimate preferred use of language. It's the preferred usage of the vast majority of people all over the world. And so this idea that the woke ideology has, that anybody who doesn't use the woke language, that gender and sex are separate, is a transphobe, is completely asinine. It's a complete bullshit position. It's like if Christians, if we didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance, or we didn't say "In God We Trust," or we didn't pray to God, then all the Christians are going to be like, "Oh my God, you're rejecting my Christian identity, and it's making me depressed." And even if it was the case that Christians had a higher suicide rate because you didn't respect their religion, would we accommodate their religion? Would we accommodate their use of language and be like, oh, okay, we're going to adopt your language now? Like, obviously not. No one is going to try to force you to pray, or force you to like say the Pledge of Allegiance, or force you to say "In God We Trust," just because a whole bunch of Christians were suicidal. The same standard should be applied to trans people here. The fact that they have psychological issues should not dictate how other groups get to use language. And using gender as a synonym with sex is a perfectly legitimate usage of language, as shown by a third of philosophers, academic philosophers, who are mostly liberals, by the way, use it this way. Like, this is not a controversial issue. This is not transphobia. It's just a completely legitimate usage of language based on what was pragmatic, what was useful to that group.
Was an interesting one. I'm surprised that it got 30% of people selecting biological. So it seems to me, right, that as I understand it, the point of introducing the concept of gender, as opposed to the concept of sex, right? So the point of drawing a distinction between sex and gender is precisely to have a concept that tracks certain, social norms, social roles.
Well, this is one of the problems that the woke community has. Like, oh, well, the whole concept of gender is to distinguish between the things. Well, maybe that's the case for you. For you, that may be the case, but not for many other people. Many other people use the term as synonymous with sex, and that's completely legitimate. The fact that you prefer to use language this way, or you see utility in using language this way, does not mean that everybody else doesn't. And so Sean says it's an archaic use of language. It doesn't matter. Like if some group of people use this terminology in this way, they are completely legitimate in doing so. Whether you use a new language or new terminologies is irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. They are allowed to use language in the way they find to be most pragmatic. And you telling them they can't do that is asinine.
Relationships, behaviors, and so on. As opposed to biological properties. So, like, there's different ways of kind of dividing up humanity. And one way we can divide them up is to look at things like chromosomes. And so we find the vast majority of people have XX or XY chromosomes. So that's one way of, like, drawing this distinction between male and female. And then there's distinctions between the types of gametes that organisms produce, and there's distinctions in the reproductive organs that organisms are born with, and so there's these distinctions in terms of like what we might think of as purely biological properties, but then we find that these distinctions are correlated with certain types of behaviors and norms and so on. Right, when we look at human societies, that group of people that have the XX chromosomes and the large gametes and those other biological features, there are certain norms of behavior associated with that, and that's the point of introducing the concept of gender. So I sort of feel like I don't know how it could be
for you. So this is the problem that SJWs have. They think, oh, well, I use it this way, therefore everybody else must also be used it this way. That's not the case. Like, if other people were brought up using this language in this way, and they're perfectly legitimate in doing so, it's wrong for you to lambast them or to criticize them for being transphobic just because they were brought up in using language in a different way that had nothing to do with any kind of bigotry. Kazakh, what about racial slurs as purely descriptive terms? Like, if your culture was brought up using the term in a non-derogatory way as just another label, then yeah, it'd be fine for your culture to continue to use the word. If the word has specifically been used as being derogatory, then it would be a racial slur. So the difference here is that in the case of these people, they didn't make up the concept of gender as being sex. It wasn't like invented specifically to criticize the trans community. This is just the way they were brought up. This has just always been the way they've used the terms. So if it's a common feature of like culture, then it's not bigoted. It's not transphobic. Like the example I used in my debate with Jangles was, imagine a group of people who never met any trans people, a country. Just imagine like a continent or country who never met any trans people, and they used the same language. So they came up with the term gender and just used it to be exactly synonymous with sex. Are they transphobic? No, obviously not. They've never met a trans person, as Jangles even admitted in the debate. And then imagine one of them flies over to a country where there are trans people, and some people in there use the term in a derogatory way. Does that person now become transphobic? No, obviously not. The fact that they were brought up using the term in a different, non-bigoted way, and they go into a culture where some people in the culture use it in a bigoted way, does not mean that they are by extension bigoted. It's a hasty generalization fallacy. Oh, Nazis breathe. You breathe. You're a Nazi. Like, this is such asinine reasoning. And I'm all for like inclusivity and diversity. I just think that, again, some of those woke SJW arguments are so objectively terrible. They just need to be debunked. We need to debunk all of the woke SJW arguments because they're so bad. I'm totally for inclusivity and diversity, and it's just the way that the woke people are going about it is just so dumb.
Anything other than like psychological or social. It feels like if you're selecting biological, you're just missing the point. Or maybe you think that the sex gender distinction is just not helpful. Maybe that's not a useful way of thinking about distinctions between groups of humans. But in that case, surely you'd just say that gender is unreal rather than that it's biological. So yeah,
well, again, this shows his own bias here. Like, there are lots of words that are synonyms. There's lots of synonyms in the English language, and using words as synonyms because they've been useful throughout your life makes a lot of sense. Like, if all of your life you've used the term gender in all of the exact same contexts you've used the word sex, then in your mind, your neuroplasticity, the way your brain is developed, is to indicate those words mean the exact same thing in every single context, because in every single context you could change one out for the other. And so in your language, in your vernacular, in your culture's linguistic usage, they mean the same thing. And so in your context, someone else telling you, oh, no, gender is this new thing that is completely separate and can be used in separate contexts and is not synonymous, they're essentially telling you that your language is wrong and you need to stop using your language, which is asinine. Like, it makes perfect sense that if you're brought up in a culture or a group of people who use these terms in a non-bigoted way to mean the exact same thing, then obviously you're going to say it's biological. Like, it refers to a thing in the world which is a real thing, and you prioritize the real thing rather than the psychological states. Therefore, you're going to use the word to refer to the real thing rather than the psychological states. This is perfectly coherent. Nothing bigoted about it. It should make perfect sense to people.
I found that kind of a bit confusing, really. I mean, it seems, like I say, I don't actually know much about the literature on this topic.
Exactly. Sage, Ohio, soda versus pop.
So, maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. But I would have thought it would be like, I'm surprised so many people choose the biological option there.
Well, so Sean here says, that is pathetic. It is a different word. Grow your language. Well, this is the bigotry I'm talking about. Like, if Christians introduced a new word, like, I don't know, God, and you use that word to refer to something that isn't an ultimate sky daddy, and they're like, oh, no, you need to grow your language. You need to adopt our language, because how dare you use our word for something else? Like, no, we get to use our language the way we were brought up using it. You are being a Nazi by forcing us to try and adopt your language. Like, you are being the problem here. You are being the asshat who's got your head shoved up your ass trying to force other people to adopt your language because you're a bigot. People are allowed to use language in the way that they were brought up using language, and you trying to be the language police and force them to adopt your language is completely asinine. It is no different from Christians trying to force you to do the Pledge of Allegiance or to pray to God or to not use the Lord's name in vain. Your preferred use of language does not give you the right to force other people to adopt your language. It's completely asinine. Mike Winter, can you suggest an alternative way to label the more inclusive understanding of sexuality? There seems to be a distinction to be made. Well, no, it's not about offering an alternative. If some people just don't want to incorporate psychological states as a label, that's fine. Like, they can just call them trans. You can call them trans. They're trans individuals. That's a perfectly legitimate label. They're trans. So if some people want to just use gender to be synonymous with sex, that's perfectly fine. They can do that. what is the word for the concept of gender? Gender is the word for the concept of gender. The difference here is what you think the concept of gender refers to. Many people think the concept of gender refers to biological sex. So there are other words you can use like trans. There are trans individuals, and everybody uses trans to mean the same thing. I don't think there's much debate over what trans means. The debate comes over when the trans and woke community want to adopt the word gender, which is already being used to mean sex in many communities, and force people to change their language. Sully, when we want to talk about the social constructions associated with men do this, women wear dresses, blah, blah, blah. Men don't share their legs, etc. What word should we use? Again, trans. Trans works fine here. Like, you can use whatever word you want. It's up to the individual. If we want to refer to cultural norms about what men and women ought to do, well, oughts, again, you're using oughts. You shouldn't use oughts. If you're saying what character traits, you can say male or female character traits. That's perfectly fine. So there's no issue here. This is super simple. Anybody who debates is just an idiot, essentially. People can use gender to mean synonymous with sex, and they can use different words. They can use whatever words they want, essentially. Make up a different word. Just use trans. They're trans individuals, or character traits.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe fewer atheists than I would have expected. I mean, it's still mostly atheists, but, you know, I'd probably predicted more like 75 to 80%.
That's a good point. Like, I would definitely agree. Like, I think that they're 20% theists is a lot higher than expected for sure. But still a vast minority. About 70% atheists, 14% other. What is so? Sully, but they're not objective. They change across cultures. That's fine. Your culture can adopt whatever language you want, but you don't get to tell another culture to adopt their preferred language. So if one culture uses gender and sex anonymously, you get no right to tell them to not do that. You can adopt whatever you want. You, in your society, are fine, but you never, ever, under any circumstances, get to try and force another society to adopt your preferred language just because you're a bigot. Next topic.
But, you know, I'd probably predicted more like 75 to 80%.
Empiricism versus rationalism. Empiricism wins, barely. 43% to 33%. I don't really see a problem here. I think that that's fine. Like empiricism is definitely where I lean, other than the fact that, you know, I adopt other kinds of knowledge, like rationalism is perfectly fine. I think that either one can be a grounds of knowledge. I don't think there's a contradiction. You can just say that both work. I'm happy with both. I think that's one of the options on the other is the both. I'd probably go for both.
Look at this. Now, in the previous survey, I can tell you that relativism about knowledge claims had about... look at this. Now, in the previous survey, I can tell you that relativism about knowledge claims had about, I think it was something like 2.5%. It was definitely, it's 2 point something percent, right, in the previous survey. For
Hey, Ricky, how's it going?
relativism about knowledge. And now we are on 5.43%. So...
Oh no, the relativists have gained a solid 2%. They're coming up. The knowledge is relative. Like, yeah, I think relative knowledge is a pretty dumb position. It's pretty obvious that I think that objective knowledge is a pretty clear thing. I don't think there's a relativistic idea to it.
The relativists are making ground. In the previous survey, relativism about knowledge was my least popular position. The least popular option that I chose was my relativism. And actually, in this survey, it's not the least popular. So that's...
Oh, not the least. Well, it's the least popular among the top candidates. There's a lot of other candidates here. But I think that clearly the case that the truth condition in knowledge is a justified true belief. If the truth condition is to hold, then knowledge can't be relative. Knowledge would have to be contingent on a reference to reality. So if truth corresponds to reality, and one of the criteria for knowledge is a justified true belief, then if something is true, then it must be objectively refer to something else. But what you can call knowledge, or what you think is knowledge, could be relative or contextual in the fact that you have X amount of justification, so you think the justification holds for the belief, even though you aren't aware of the truth of the claim. You have a justification to believe it's true. Therefore, you can call it knowledge. But the fact of the matter of whether or not a proposition is knowledge would not be relative. So I don't think relativism works for knowledge.
That's interesting. It's turned out that I have positions that are more unpopular than relativism about knowledge. But look at this. We have almost doubled our the proportion of philosophers who accept this position. So good news for the future. Hopefully in the next survey we will see relativism.
How many is that? So there's 300 respondents, 50% are contextual, so that's 150. So 10% of that is 15. 15 people? 15 people are relativists? I think 15. 15 philosophers answered relativism. I hope my math is right there.
Relativism about knowledge on, 10% or something. So something to look forward to for the future for relativism.
Hey, man, don't skip them. Gotta go with
relativism about knowledge. But look at this. Our position. We'll see relativism about knowledge. Surprised to see our the proportion of philosophers who accept this position. So good news for the future. Hopefully in the next survey we will see relativism about knowledge on 10% or something. So something to look forward to for the future.
Oh, laws of nature, Humean or non-Humean? Mike, no, I'm not saying trans is a third type of gender. I'm just saying you refer to people who want to transition to other sex characteristics as trans. Like they'd still be male. It'd still be male and biologically male and gender male because they mean the same thing. So it wouldn't be a third. There are only two sexes and there's only two genders by this same definition. Intersex is just a combination of the two. So again, this is just a waste of time because I've already addressed this. I'm already right on this. I've already proven this to be the case. It's just changing people's language is a waste of time. There are two sexes, male and female, and intersex is a combination of male and female traits. There's no third option. It's not a spectrum, or it's a spectrum between two extremes. There are two sexes. Laws of nature, Humean or non-Humean? I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what it means to be Humean versus non-Humean laws. Got to be honest on that one. Google that. Humean laws. Humean. Got it right. Humeanism about laws of nature is an approach to scientific laws which denies that laws imply necessary connections between distinct existences. Roughly the idea that laws of nature reduce to the patterns of occurrence non-modal events that occur in the world. I still have no idea what that means. Laws have more of a descriptive character. For Humeans, laws have more of a descriptive character. The laws are merely accurate reports of what regularly happens in the universe. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's correct. What? So what is a non-Humean? Non-Humean. Non-Humean laws. Non-Humeans think that the laws of nature are not those patterns themselves, but something else that is somehow responsible for those. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'd be a non-Humean. I'd say that the laws of nature refer to like actual physical forces, curvature of space-time or whatever. So yeah, I definitely lean towards non-Humanism. Because if humanism says the laws themselves are descriptive of the patterns, then it says that they could be different. So yeah, I'd be a non-Humean in the sense that I think that the laws describe a physical something like the curvature of space-time, which causes the changes in nature, rather than just being descriptive of consistent patterns. Yep, non-Humanism for me.
For relativism.
Logic, classical or non-classical? Oof, this one's interesting. So classical logic, A equals A. Standard logic, law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. Non-classical, paraconsistent logic, dialetheism, many-valued logic, fuzzy logic. Non-standard logics actually take a decent chunk. So I tend to go with standard logic, A equals A logic, at least pragmatically. Yeah, that's a pretty large chunk of non-standard logics.
Yeah. I'm surprised to see 32% of people accepting an objective meaning of life.
So this part, I've actually commented on this. I think there is an objective meaning of life. I think that it's tied into the moral question. So I think that you can, if you believe in objective morality, you can tie meaning of life into the objective moral standard. And so if you have an objective moral standard, you can also have an objective meaning of life. So I don't see that as too harsh.
I mean, this is what I was kind of hinting at when I said earlier that philosophers seem to be like more inclined towards realism, right? There's like loads of realists. Like, I just don't know how it makes sense to accept an objective meaning of life unless you are a traditional theist, unless you believe that there is some omnipotent, omniscient creator of the universe who has set out a plan for humanity, right? Like, maybe in that sense, you can have a meaning of life, right? Like, there's some purpose to your life. But like, if you don't accept that, and obviously most philosophers are not theists, certainly not traditional theists, then I don't know, man. I just don't know, like, what.
Well, this is really confusing here. Like this guy adopts or looked at in this first response to Platonic objects, like, oh, Platonic objects make so much sense. Well, if there's Platonic objects, like abstract objects, you can have other kinds of Platonic objects, like meaning objects, morality objects. So it shouldn't be too hard to understand that there's a larger context to having meaning beyond just religious. So you can have those kinds of Platonic meaning, Platonic morality, which is Platonic moral objects, whatever. So I don't see why it would be so hard if you grant the Platonic mathematic objects that you would also grant Platonic moral or meaning-based objects.
What sense does it make to talk of a meaning of life, right, that's not ultimately grounded in, the values of particular individuals? That's I mean, almost incomprehensible to me. To be fair, I have not read much of the meaning of life literature, so maybe that is why. But yeah, but that's something I'll have to do, right? So I'll have to try to understand this. That's something for the future. But even so, man, that just seems totally nuts. Like, the very idea of like objective meanings and purposes, I think, is really ridiculous. I mean, there are I'm aware, attempts to kind of ground a notion of teleology in, like, natural selection, selected effect functions, things like that. I mean, I don't think that works. But even if that kind of thing does work, you're not going to get a meaning of life out of it, right? Like, you can get maybe teleology, you can get purpose with respect to particular biological properties or features, like, the heart. Maybe the heart has the purpose of pumping blood or something like that. But the idea is there's going to be a meaning of life. You're not going to get that out of that sort of Darwinian framework. And I'm not. I mean, where else is it going to? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this seems very strange to me. Okay. And here we are. That's the purpose of pumping blood or something like that. But the idea is there's going to be a meaning of life. You're not going to get that out of that sort of Darwinian framework. And I'm not. I mean, where else is it going to? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this seems very 62. The mechanism.
So here we go. Go back. Mental content, internalism or externalism? That, I have no idea what that means. Mental content. Let's do mental content. Mental content, internalism or externalism. Externalism about the mind. Internalism is the thesis that no fact about the world can provide reason for action independently of desires or beliefs. Externalism is the thesis that reasons are to be identified with objective features of the world. So yeah, definitely externalism. Yeah. Definitely think that there are features of the world that can control your reasons, for sure.
Okay. And here we are. The meta-ethics question. Look at that. 62%.
Yeah, moral realism. Booyah.
Moral realists. 62% of philosophers accept moral realism. that is an embarrassment. That is an embarrassment. Look, right. I have certain. I have to some degree a bit of a contrarian streak, right? I have contrarian inclinations, so I do enjoy it when my positions are unpopular, right? But the problem is, right? This is embarrassing, guys. Okay, um, okay. I'm sorry. All right. I apologize for being for my failure to be diplomatic, but this is just me. I'm talking off the top of my head, and I'm expressing what I think, right? And I'm talking without constraint. And when I'm talking without constraint, this is what happens, right? Moral realism is a fucking ridiculous position, and it is an embarrassment that 62% of philosophers accept it. I say it's an embarrassment. It's not surprising, right? In the previous survey, I think it was something like 56%. So actually, I mean, 56%, 62%.
Yeah, so moral realism has gone up by about 7%. More moral realists now than there were in the previous survey. Kick-ass moral realism. I think that's all thanks to me. Like, really, it's really my fault because I presented my objective morality and just all philosophers were just so impressed that it changed 7% of philosophers because my morality is just so amazing. That was really the reason.
It's not a huge change. And it's not surprising to me that there was a change in favour of realism. This is what I was expecting. In fact, if anything, I was expecting it to be even worse than this. I would probably predicted like
even worse.
Well, maybe not. I was going to say like 65 to 70. Yeah, I probably would have predicted that. So there are several things that have happened since the last survey, or there were things that were happening around the time of the last survey that have since had time to gain more adherence. So first of all, more recent in the more recent metaethics literature, I think there have been some pretty what a lot of people find to be quite convincing attempts to defend moral non-naturalism, or at least there have been more sophisticated attempts to defend non-naturalist positions. Obviously, there was a time when non-naturalism was seen as kind of hopeless, like it was just metaphysically weird to postulate non-natural properties, and it had problems with the epistemology, like how we're going to come to know what these non-natural properties are. But there are philosophers like Michael Huemer and David Enoch and Terence Cuneo and so on who've done a lot of work at trying to answer those problems. And, I don't find their positions convincing, but it's not surprising that a lot of people do. I mean, they're clever people. So, these more sophisticated forms of non-naturalism will have gained adherence. The other thing is that there are arguments that have been discussed in really the sort of last 10, 15 years. I mean, particularly the companions in guilt argument. So the companions in guilt argument, well, at least with respect to epistemic norms, a lot of people find that convincing. Again, I think that's
companions and guilt argument. Find like a short one on that. The basic thrust of the companions and guilt argument in ethics is the idea that if we reject objectivism about morality, then we are forced by parity of reasoning to reject objectivism about its target companions. What? But as the rejection of objectivism about the target companions is unacceptable, we should retain the objectivist view about morality as well. In spite of its frequent occurrence in the contemporary literature, the general prospects of the companions guilt strategy for ethics remains poorly understood. Companions and guilt argument example. Why? Moral error theory. Moral facts possess a particular conceptual profile. Typically, they are categorically normative. The second premise is that no entities with this conceptual profile exist. One recently popular strategy for avoiding this radical thesis is the companion guilt argument. The argument proceeds by identifying some non-moral facts that both share the problematic conceptual profiles, moral facts, and relevant prospects, and can be shown to exist. Identifying facts of this kind would diffuse the argument for moral error theory. If some facts with the same conceptual profile as moral facts exist, then we shouldn't deny that moral facts exist on the basis of the conceptual profile either. It's interesting. So yeah, if you take, because the error theory, moral non-cognitivism say that most moral statements say that there are oughts or normativity, and those are incoherent. So if you could give some kind of similar kind of other argument, either contains normativity or non-normativity, but another unique kind of property, but it does exist, then that would debunk the more moral error theorist. Yeah, that makes sense. My approach is just to get rid of normativity. I think normativity is stupid, but that's an interesting approach.
Crap argument. I don't think it works. But a lot of people do think it works. So, given that there's been more recent discussion of arguments like that, and then there's also just been attempts by people like, I guess, Parfit and Scanlon to defend like minimal realism. The idea that realism doesn't really incur the sort of commitments or metaphysical commitments that people had assumed. Like all of this, there's just this sort of convergence towards a more realist approach, or there's convergence towards approaches that are more friendly to realism. In fact, even anti-realists seem to be making so many concessions to realists that they end up kind of collapsing into realism. So this is one of the problems that arises for quasi-realists. Quasi-realists have become so successful at capturing everything that realists want. Quasi-realists think that they can have moral truth, moral facts, moral properties, and so on. That a lot of people think there just isn't really that much of a distinction. That actually that ends up collapsing into realism as well. So we seem to be moving in a realist direction. That explains this result, but it does not excuse it. Okay? Right then. Let's move on. Do I have... Yeah.
Skipping so many of the good ones. Metaphilosophy. Naturalism or non-naturalism? Naturalism wins. Non-naturalism. It's an interesting question. What does non-naturalism even mean? There's some supernatural extra ontology, or multiple ontologies, kind of like a dualism where there's a supernatural and a natural ontology that exist at the same time. I'm definitely in the naturalism camp for sure. I don't think we have any evidence of any supernatural anything.
Do I have? Yeah.
Mind physicalism or non-physicalism? Physicalism wins. It's a significant majority in neurology, a significant majority in cognitive science. It's just philosophy, of course. You got the crazy philosophers, 32% non-physicalism. What silliness. Silly.
Yeah, kind of surprising to see only 50% physicalists. I knew that the tide was sort of turning against physicalism a little bit, but with things like panpsychism and I guess pragmatist approaches and all that. But even so, it sort of still feels like physicalism is the general consensus. You
Dominant
kind of
force.
predict it to be like 70% or something, or 80%. But no, most it's still the majority position, but only 50%. That's quite.
Moral judgments, cognitivism versus non-cognitivism. Cognitivism wins 70%. Non-cognitivism 20%. Yeah, non-cognitivism is the position. Sully is correct. Non-cognitivism is the position that moral statements don't make sense. They're non-cognitive. They don't have any coherent meaning. Cognitivism is that they do have coherent meaning. Whether or not you accept them is a different matter, but as long as you can understand the sentence, they refer to some coherent sentence, then they're cognitive. Panpsychism is worse than idealism. I don't, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I'd say panpsychism is worse than idealism or not. I haven't really tried to epistemically assess which is more dumb.
Quite interesting.
Moral motivation, internalism versus externalism. This is a really interesting one. So moral motivation is like, if you hear a moral statement, don't kill or whatever. Where does the motivation come from? Does it cause you to want to not kill? Just hearing the moral statement and knowing the moral statement is true, does that give you a motivation? Does that give you a motivation, or does it not give you a motivation? Judgment internalism, I think, is the position that it does not. Judgment internalism is the position that it's purely subjective, like your motivation is subjective. If you hear a moral statement like don't kill or you shouldn't kill, then whether or not you're motivated by that statement is dependent on your psychology. And judgment externalism, I think, is the position that if you hear the statement, then there's some fact about the statement which compels you, some motivational fact that if you know the moral fact, it motivates you to do something. My position is that no, you don't need any kind of motivation. So it's, I think internal. I might have been getting it backwards. I don't remember. Judgment internal. Let's go judgment internalism. I think I got it backwards. Yeah, judgment internalism is the position that a person cannot sincerely make a moral statement without being motivated. So I'm a judgment externalist. So judgment internalism says that if you make a moral statement, you would be motivated by the moral statement. I don't think that's the case. I think it can have a fact of the matter, like saying the moon is 250,000 miles away, has a fact of the matter, and I don't think its moral content motivates you just because you know it's moral. I think that it can be known without being causing you to be motivated to act upon it. So moral externalism is the better one. Moral externalism wins. And I'm surprised that it's so high too. Like, given that my moral theory is so unique, I would expect moral externalism to be a much lower percent. But I am reassured because it is so high. It's about the same, 50-50 split. Newcomb's problem. 1 box or 2 boxes? Newcomb's problem. The 2 principles of choice. Newcomb's problem. Newcomb's paradox. Philosophy of mathematics. Involving a game. Newcomb's paradox was created by William Newcomb. I don't know what the problem is. The problem. There is a reliable predictor, another player, and 2 boxes designated A and B. The player is given a choice between taking only box B or taking both boxes A and B. The player knows the following. Box A is a clear and always contains a visible $1,000. Box B is opaque and its content has already been set by the predictor. If the predictor has predicted the player will take both boxes A and B, then box B will contain nothing. If the predictor has predicted the player will take only box B, then box B will contain $1 million. The player does not know what the predictor predicted or what box B contains while making the choice. And the question is, is the player going to pick box A, or should you pick box 1 or box 2, box A or box B, or both? Pick one, lean towards one box, both boxes. So you can take both boxes. There's a reliable predictor, a player, and 2 boxes designated A and B. The player is given a choice between taking only box B or taking both A and B. I mean, if the minimum option is nothing, predicted choices, player outcome. So it's a Pascal's wager kind of. This is a Pascal's wager kind of a box. Because if you only take box B, and it predicted you'd only take box B, then you win like $1 million. If you pick box B, but it predicted A and B, you get 0. So the question is how good is the predictor? It says it's a reliable predictor. So if it's a reliable predictor, then I would say because it's a reliable predictor, I would trust in the predictor that it's going to know that I'm going to pick box B. Do I know? The player does not know what the predictor predicted. But if I know it's a reliable predictor and I know my best choice is the $1 million and it would be able to read that, then it would, yeah, I would agree with Kazakh here. I'd say take one box, take the $1 million. But wait, there's actually, but if it predicts box B and I take A and B, then I get $1 million and 1,000. But the 1,000 doesn't really matter. Who cares about the 1,000? The question is what if the box predicts I'm going to pick A and B, and I pick B, I get nothing. But yeah, I'd say that because it's a reliable predictor, it's going to predict I'm going to pick B. Like it would never predict I'd pick A and B. So I'm gonna agree with Kazakh here. Pick one box, give me the B. Give me the B million. I don't even care about the 1,000. I'm gonna go with the one box, option A.
Now look at this. 40% of philosophers just don't want to have £1 million. Strange, but again, not surprising.
Normative ethics, deontology, consequentialism, or virtue ethics. Split down the middle on everything. I lean towards a consequentialist view. I mean, technically, I think they're all kind of consequentialist in a way. Definitely don't really care about virtue ethics as much.
Now this was a surprise.
Iraq. How is your as of yet undiscovered moral substrate not giving fodder to theists? Because it's saying morality can exist without a god. So if objective morality exists without a god, that kind of debunks the main theist argument. So it would actually counter the theist argument.
I think this might have been the most surprising thing of all, actually. Virtue ethics here is at 37%. Now, in the previous survey, and this was only just over 10 years ago, virtue ethics was only at 18%. Deontology and consequentialism, as far as I know, I think they're about the same as they were in the previous survey. But virtue ethics has seen a huge rise in adherence. It's like, man, I mean, virtue ethicists surge here. What an incredible gain of ground the virtue ethicists have had. And I have no idea why this would be. I mean, I'm not aware of any, recent books that have been well known as presenting a more sophisticated, more defensible approach to virtue ethics. I mean, maybe this just could be my complete ignorance of normative ethics, right? Like maybe there has been some really important stuff in the last 10 years that I should know about. But no, I don't. I don't know why this would be. If anybody does have any thoughts on that, I'd be very interested to hear it, because that's pretty. It's doubled. I mean, the relativists doubled, but we doubled from 2.5 to 5% or something. Virtue ethics way up to 37% here. Amazing. Okay. Perceptual experience.
I'm going to take a break, go to the bathroom, be back in a minute. Make like a intermission screen or something for bathroom break. All right, let's go.
Now, I will confess something here. I don't know what the distinction is between representationalism and sense data theory.
Me neither.
So my understanding of representationalism is that the point is we do not directly perceive objects in the external world, rather the direct objects of our perception are mental representations. So when I open my eyes, I look at a table, I'm looking at a table right now, okay? So a representationalist will say that I'm not directly perceiving the table itself, the mind-independent external object. Instead, I'm perceiving some sort of mental representation of the table. So it's a kind of indirect perception view. That's my understanding of representationalism. But I thought that was what sense data theory was. Like, so the sense data are the mental representations. Like, isn't that the idea that like, you know, I look at the table and I have but I'm not perceiving the table.
Train wreck. I have no idea why virtue ethics is so. I don't really like virtue ethics, so not a clue.
I'm perceiving sense data, like, you know, colors, and maybe I can touch it and I can, like, you know, feel certain textures and so on. But those sense data represent some object in the external world. I'm not directly perceiving the external world, I'm perceiving sense data. So it seems like these are just different names for the same thing. And yet representationalism is by far the most popular of the options, sense data by far the least popular. So I can't explain that. Again, this is perhaps just me expressing my ignorance of something I should know about.
I have no opinion on those. I don't. Whatever. Doesn't make a difference to me. I don't care. I skipped one again. No skipping. Personal. That's the same one. Come on.
Expressing my ignorance of something I should know about.
Personal identity. Biological view. Psychological view. Further fact view. Personal identity, biological view. So personal identity, biological view. The biological criterion of personal identity is if X is a person at time T and Y exists at any other. If person X person, I got it. Biological view. Yeah, I don't really care about those very much. They're not interesting positions. Philosophical methods. Which method is most useful? This one's kind of interesting.
It's by far the least popular. Expressing my methods is, you know.
Conceptual analysis. Oh, you accept or reject on these. That's interesting. Yeah, conceptual analysis makes sense. Conceptual engineering. Empirical philosophy, definitely. I definitely think that's important. Experimental philosophy, that one's... I don't know what that means. What is experimental philosophy?
No, it was kind of an interesting one. When I suppose it's interesting to see what people have responded, but I think this is a pretty silly question. When I initially answered the survey, I did try to do this. Like, I tried to, you know, say which ones I accepted and which ones I rejected. But, I mean, look, the thing is that these are different methods, and different methods are appropriate for different goals, right? Different methods are appropriate for different forms of inquiry. So it just depends on what you're trying to do, what question you're trying to answer. To ask which is most useful / important. Like,
can I explain each of these methods? I can give it a shot. So, all right. Philosophy conceptual method. I don't know, maybe conceptual analysis. Conceptual analysis. Conceptual analysis is one of the main traditions of philosophy. Arguably dating back to Plato's early dialogues, the basic idea is that questions like what is knowledge, what is justice, or what is truth can be answered solely on the basis of one's grasp of the relevant concepts. The ideal result of a conceptual analysis would be a definition or analysis of the relevant X that is typically formulated as a necessary biconditional that states necessary and sufficient conditions for being X. For example, a typical formulation of the classical analysis of knowledge as justified true belief is S knows that P if and only if P is true, S believes that P, and S is justified in believing that P. Here, conditions 1 and 3 state individual necessary and jointly sufficient conditions for knowing that P. Conceptual analysis, what's the next one? Conceptual engineering. Conceptual engineering. Philosophy, conceptual engineering. The key idea of conceptual engineering is to take... Conceptual engineering is both a philosophical method and a name increasingly popular field of metaphysical research. The key idea of conceptual engineering is to take a normative approach to traditional philosophical questions instead of asking what our current concepts of knowledge, say, knowledge, race, gender, do mean. The conceptual engineers ask what these concepts should mean. The underlying assumption is that our actual concepts are not necessarily ideal and that improving them is an important desideratum of philosophy. The contemporary metaphysical debate about conceptual engineering involves questions regarding its normative foundation and actual feasibility, its coherence with semantic externalism, and its proper limits. So definitely that would be the SJW position. Oh, you must adopt the gender words that we use because it's better. Like, no. So conceptual analysis is definitely better in that respect. Let's go empirical philosophy. Empirical philosophy. Empirical philosophy method. This is empiricism. I don't know if there's like an actual empirical philosophy method. I don't know where to describe that one. Empirical philosophy versus conceptual analysis. Gains. The poverty of conceptual analysis. The difference between knowledge and research is conceptual analysis. Let's go concepts, conceptual analysis. Control F. Empiricism and nativism about concepts. The ontology of concepts, the structure of concepts, empiricism and nativism about concepts. Empiricism and nativism about concepts. One of the oldest questions about concepts concerns whether there are any innate concepts, and if so, how much of the conceptual system is innate. Empiricists maintain that there are few, if any, innate concepts, and that most cognitive capacities are acquired on the basis of few relatively simple general purpose cognitive mechanisms. Don't have a position on that.
Conceptual analysis or empirical philosophy, right? Which of these is most important? That's like asking, hammer versus screwdriver, which is most useful / important? I mean, it depends on what you're doing with it.
Hammer is more important.
There obviously isn't some, it doesn't make any sense to give just a general answer to say, well, the hammer is more important.
Hammer is more important.
No, it depends on depends on the job. You've got to choose the right tool for the job. And in philosophy, there are all sorts of different questions we might be asking. And, any of these methods, could be legitimate depending on the context. That's my take on this question. Interesting, but kind of silly.
Philosophical progress. Is there any? None. 3%. That's interesting. 4% of philosophers think there is no progress in philosophy. I guess it depends on what you mean by progress here. Like, progress in the way we analyze conceptual ideas? Sure. Does it make progress in the world? No. So is there progress in philosophy? I would say yes. But does philosophy make progress in the world? I'd say no.
Now look at this. Isn't this a shocker? That in a survey of professional philosophers, right, in a survey of people who are employed to do philosophy, only 3.8% think that there's no philosophical progress. Why could that be? The only possible explanation for this result is that the arguments in favour of philosophical progress are so overwhelmingly good. It's a slam dunk case against the view that there's no philosophical progress. That's obviously why these results are the way they are. There's no other possible explanation for this. Yeah. Okay.
Wait, go back.
Progress. Progress. There's no.
No. When you go back a little more. Go back a little more.
There's just it's a.
God damn it! So hard.
There's no other possible explanation for this.
All right. Political philosophy. Communitarianism, egalitarianism, or libertarianism? I like egalitarianism is believing that the principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. What is communitarianism? Communitarianism, a theory of social organization based off small self-governing communities, an ideology which emphasizes the responsibility of the individual to the community, socialism, and the social importance of the family. The family unit's important in a way. Yeah, egalitarianism, definitely better there. Libertarianism is total freedom of the individual. So yeah, I'd go with egalitarianism. I think for sure, egalitarianism. Proper names: Phrygian or Million. Oh, like Frag or Mill, John Stuart Mill. Proper names: Phrygian or Million. Proper names: Phrygian or Million. Some contemporary proponents of a million theory. John Stuart Mill distinguished between connotative and denotative meaning and argued that proper names included no other semantic context to the proposition than identifying the referent of the name and were hence purely denotative. Since contemporary proponents of Millian theory of proper names argue that the process through which something becomes a proper name is exactly the gradual loss of connotative for pure denotation, such as the process that turned the descriptive propositions Long Island into the proper name, Long Island. Frege argued that one had to distinguish between the sense and the reference of the name, and that different names for the same entity might identify the same referent without being formally synonymous. Hey, Mike, how's it going? Yeah, I'm a fan of the sense reference distinction. I'm a fan of Frege's sense reference distinction. But I guess the Mill's approach makes sense, like where it was used as a description, it was a Long Island, and then that became the title of the island, the name of the island, as a loss of the use of the term. I guess that makes sense. I don't really have a position here. I think either one's fine.
Yeah.
Race. Here we go. This one's the fun one. The race, biological, social, or unreal. Biological. 20% of philosophers think race is a biological fact. That's right. Race, and so I've argued this for the sake of argument that race is biological because we can use the term race to refer to echoclines. Like race is synonymous with echoclines. You can use the word race to be synonymous with the actual real phenomenon of echoclines. And it makes perfect sense. So yes, race can be biological. It has nothing to do with racism. It's just simply the word can be used to refer to an actually existing phenomenon that we know is real, which is called echoclines. And so it can be considered to be biological. It's a minority, like 20%. But that's, I think, the same as some other positions. So it's not racist to say race is biological. You can choose to use race to refer to a biological phenomenon, and that's perfectly consistent. Social is 60, that's fine. Unreal is 15. So the fact that race isn't real is like the minority. The race is something.
Okay.
Scientific realism. Science describes reality. It's not instrumental. It is a real thing. There is real stuff. Science is science. Science is the best. Science wins.
Well,
science, it works, bitches, to quote Richard Dawkins.
Have a lot of things to say about these other ones. Scientific anti-realism, I think, has ever so slightly gained a little bit of ground. I think it was like 11% last time. So, I mean, that's, I don't know, it's probably not statistically significant, is it? But
teletransporter, new matter, survival or death. So if you were to teleport Star Trek style from a planet to like the beam me up, Scotty, would you still be you? Would you die and be replaced by something else? What is your position? I mean, if it could transport everything, every single particle in your body, I think you would survive. I think that since we know the brain is physical and everything in the brain is what makes you up, then if you could transport literally all of it and reconstruct it on the other end exactly as it was with no differences, I think you would still be you. I don't think it would be like a mock you, like a replacement, like a second you. I think it would really be the real you. I don't think there's much difference. Because like if you think about it in terms of time, like your cells are replaced every 2 years or whatever, every 8 years for some cells. So you, like when you fall asleep and wake up, it's still you, right? So if when you fall asleep and wake up, it's still you, how would that be fundamentally any different from being teleported, deconstructed and teleported? I think that it would be pretty much the same as falling asleep. So I think it'd still be you.
Anyway, 35% of philosophers quite happy to use a form of transport that involves the total obliteration of their bodies and brains.
Time, A theory, B theory. B theory wins over A theory. So A theory is the domino theory of time, where it's just one domino, next domino, next domino. This is the one that's brought up against God arguments that says there can't be a past infinite regress because it's the A theory of time. Everything is a consistent stream of just one thing after the next. Then it leads to a logical contradiction. Therefore, there must be a necessary being. Well, most philosophers reject A theory anyway, so it's not really a critique. No one really cares because that argument fails. No one cares because they don't think time is the A theory of time.
They must be the same as the ones who are quite happy to just walk away with £1,000 rather than $1 million. Yeah, strange people, philosophers.
Trolley problem. This is the companion problem to the.
They must to
trolley problem. God damn it! Why does it do that to me? Trolley problem. 5 straight ahead, 1 on the side track. Turn requires switching. So there are 5 people on a track. A trolley is going towards the 5 people. It's going to kill them. Should you flip the switch knowing that there's 1 person on the second track and it will kill them? Most people say yes. So this is the companion question to the fat man problem. Should you push the fat man off of the bridge? And while most people say you should definitely flip the switch, you should not pull the fat man. The consensus is you should pull the switch, kill the 1 guy on the other track, not push the fat guy. Pushing the fat guy is immoral. There's some difference. What is the moral difference between our intuitions in these two cases? My moral theory answers this question. It says that the act of pushing the fat man is an involuntary imposition of will on the fat man, in addition to the involuntary imposition of him being run over by the train, which is the moral substantive difference here. That my moral problem can answer these, why our intuitions are different between the two cases, because there is actually a functional difference between pushing a fat man and flipping a switch and having it hit somebody. Truth. Correspondence, deflationary or epistemic correspondence theory of truth. Thank you very much. I win. Correspondence. Truth corresponds to reality. Victory is mine. Precepts are wrong.
Okay.
Vagueness, epistemic, metaphysical, or semantic. So vagueness as in the fact that a sentence or whatever can refer to many different things. Yeah, semantic makes sense. It's just a figment of language. We don't have a precise enough language in order to correspond to reality to the point where it's actually there. This is opposed to like metaphysical vagueness, where the vagueness is actually like ambiguity in the way reality is. Epistemic, not sure what epistemic would mean here. Where it's just a lack of our knowledge. We just don't have enough knowledge, and so it seems vague to us because we lack knowledge on the topic. Maybe I might lean toward epistemic vagueness, where vagueness is a property of our ignorance. We just don't have enough epistemic basis to come up with the correct knowledge, rather than it's a semantic issue. But it's also a figment of language. Our language is vague. So I'd say both epistemic and vagueness are probably definitely not metaphysical. Zombies. Philosophical zombies. Inconceivable. Conceivable, but not metaphysically possible, or metaphysically possible. Inconceivable, 16%. That's the Sean Carroll position. They're inconceivable. Accepts or lean towards conceivable, but not metaphysically possible. Yeah, I'd say that. I'd say conceivable, but not metaphysically possible. Because I think physicalism is true. Because if physicalism is true, then if you mirrored everything about the metaphysical states, then you would get a conscious being, and so it wouldn't be a philosophical zombie. But I think it is conceivable. I think it is conceivable to understand the concept of what a zombie is referring to. So I definitely think it's conceivable. It's just not metaphysically possible. And that is for Sully. If Sully's still in the chat, that was the debate between Carroll and Goff in the thing you sent me.
Well, I don't...
a zombie, for anybody who didn't know, philosophical zombie is the idea that can there be an exact copy of you with every single physical fact being the same, except it's not conscious? So you're conscious and it's not, but all of the physical facts are the same. Is it conceivable? Yes. Is it possible? Probably not, because physics is what causes consciousness.
Necessarily have anything to say about every question.
Abortion, first trimester, no special circumstances, permissible or impermissible. Abortion in the first trimester, permissible. I am pro-choice, so I definitely agree with that. Impermissible, religious people. So of the religious people who are philosophers, only about half of them, or 2/3 of them, are pro-life. How do I define metaphysically possible? It's hard to say. It's essentially synonymous with logically possible. There's a slight differences, but there's a really good debate in philosophy about whether there's a difference or not. So I just go with logical and metaphysical possibility are about the same. But it's metaphysically possible is slightly more constrained than logical possibility. There's subsets.
Obviously. The abortion question was, I think, not as interesting as it could have been, because I think what they should have done is given more options. It's not remotely surprising to see that 80% of philosophers think it's permissible in the first trimester. I mean, that just, that's not a shock at all. It would have been much more interesting, I think, to give, say, you could have like maybe split it by trimester. You could have said, is it acceptable first trimester, second trimester, third trimester? Or maybe you could have said like, is it acceptable first trimester? Is it acceptable up to viability? Is it acceptable up to birth? Now, it would have been very interesting to see what philosophers said about that, right? Like, where are philosophers tending to draw the line on this? How many philosophers think abortion is okay up to birth? How many think it's okay up to viability? That's...
Swift F, how does abortion fit into my model? I think I think that killing anything with consciousness is wrong. So once the baby becomes conscious, it's immoral to kill it. Once before it's conscious is totally fine. Nothing wrong with killing it before it's conscious. But I think after it becomes conscious, it can still be justifiable to kill it because it's self-defense of your own body. So I am pro-choice in that I think that the woman should have right over her body, but it is technically immoral to kill the baby. It's just a justified immoral action, just like self-defense. This is neither Digital Gnosis or James Fodor Genius. This is Kane. Kane B. Kane B is the guy who's doing this. Let's see. Hide. So Kane B is good. I like his philosophy stuff.
An interesting question. So who knows? Maybe in the next survey they'll give more options for this one.
Aesthetic experience, perception, pleasure, or sui generis. Sui generis, I think it means like unique. Sui generis means like unique, right? Sui generis meaning, yep, unique. Sui generis means unique. I don't have a position on that one. Except justified analysis of knowledge, justified true belief, other analysis, no analysis. Accept justified true belief, 23%. Minority accept justified true belief. Accept or lead toward other is 32%, and no analysis. No analysis of knowledge. That's interesting. No analysis. I don't know what no analysis means there.
Oh, look at this. 23%, well, I mean, actually closer to 24% of philosophers endorse justified true belief. Isn't that remarkable? Nearly a quarter still hanging on to justified true belief account of knowledge. It's wonderful to see. I selected justified true belief. But, you know, justified true belief it's where we all start when we do epistemology. That's kind of the starting point, right? And then you get hit with all the Gettier cases and so on, and, you know, epistemology kind of spins out from there. So it's remarkable to see that nearly a quarter of us do not just start with justified true belief. That's where we end. I mean, for me, I think that I'm not like I don't, you know. I'm not like that committed to justified true belief, but I'm inclined towards it. I think that
Trainwreck, those are the Gettier cases. So the Gettier cases are the ones where a broken clock gets the time right twice a day.
The point of philosophy is conceptual engineering, or at least that's one of the things. That's one of the points of philosophy, right? That's one of the things that we can do when we do philosophy is, you know, natural language contains all of these concepts that play useful roles, but that are confused, messy, incoherent. And part of the point of philosophy is to precisify them. And I think that justified true belief is a good precisification of knowledge.
I agree.
One of the things that I would point out about Gettier cases is, first of all, there's a pretty good argument that any analysis of knowledge which treats the justification condition and the truth condition as being independent is going to face Gettier cases. This is something Zagzebski points out in the inescapability of Gettier problems. So, like, if you want to have an analysis of knowledge that's treating those things as separate, if you want to say that there can be false justified beliefs, and I think we should want to say that, then you're going to face Gettier problems. So actually, Gettier problems are a problem for almost everybody, right? At least almost everybody who's trying to give an analysis of knowledge. And so with that in mind, it's like I don't see them as providing any reason to move from the justified true belief analysis. And in any case, I think that, you know, I don't see why analyses should be sort of hostage to intuitions, or at least so strongly hostage to intuitions about all sorts of, cases that are, relatively unusual or whatever, there are lots of things that we're weighing up when we're trying to give an analysis of a concept. And I think that we can say that Gettier cases are cases where somebody, has knowledge, but like almost didn't, or they have knowledge, but they were lucky to have it, right? I think lucky knowledge is possible, and that seems to me to be what's going on in Gettier cases. The mere fact that, like, intuitively we don't seem to have knowledge in those cases, I don't think that fact alone should move us from the justified true belief analysis. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, so I'm just going to move on. But I just want to say, it's nice to see 24% of people still hanging on to JTB.
Arguments for theism. Which argument is the strongest? Cosmological, design, ontological, pragmatic, or moral? Cosmological, 20%. Like, how does that work? I mean, I guess the bar is so low because the theistic arguments are so garbage that, I mean, the cosmological is the only one that's actually valid and sound. It's like anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause, which isn't God. So, I mean, I guess that works in that sense. Design, design makes sense. Like I've said, the design argument is probably a pretty good one in that, like, complexity of DNA or whatever, back before we knew that we had proof that it was produced by natural processes, which we do now. It's very, very interesting to think that probabilities can be so low and probable without reason, without some kind of determined reason. Ontological. How did 10% of people think the ontological argument is a good argument? That's just hilarious. Like, wow. Like, pragmatic is the Justin Petersons of the world. Ontological. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just goes over it, just glosses over it. Belief or credence, which is more fundamental? Belief, credence, or neither? Belief. I'm going with belief.
Remain to be convinced that the belief or credence question is even remotely interesting.
Capital punishment. Impermissible. Yeah, so my moral view, capital punishment is immoral, but I think it can be justified. Like if the amount of resources it would take to keep the prisoners alive is greater than what you have available to keep the people alive, then I'd say capital punishment is justifiable, but it's still immoral. It's always going to be immoral, even if it can be justified. Causation.
Now this is my least popular response. I said that in the previous survey, relativism was my least popular response. In this survey, it's causation, because I said causation was non-existent. I adopted that position, and that's only at 4.1%. So,
well, I don't really see the difference here between non-existence and counterfactual difference making. So in those cases, like for causation to be non-existent, I mean nothing, like Hume's argument that there's literally nothing that causes anything. Whereas I think it's more like counterfactual, where it's like describing some other thing that occurs or didn't occur. So I don't think it's literally non-existence. I think it's simply a description of some other things that exist, kind of like laws of nature or whatever. What do I think of Aquinas' 5 ways? They're garbage. I think Aquinas' 5 ways are garbage. That is my position on the Aquinas' 5 ways. Argument from motion, what's the other one? Perfection, degrees, argument from degrees. Forget what the other ones are.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Chinese room. Understands or doesn't understand. So Chinese room argument is there's a guy inside of a room. He's given a bunch of letters, Chinese letters. He doesn't know what the letters mean. He just looks at a big pamphlet, and in the pamphlet, he just throws out the corresponding alternative letter. So if you get this letter, show the next letter. Is that understanding? I would say no, that isn't understanding. So that guy doesn't understand the room, but that doesn't mean that a pro can't understand. Concepts, nativism or empiricism. Yeah, I'd say empiricism. I say there's some nativism, like the cuckoo bird. The cuckoo bird is born into a nest of another bird's parents. So the cuckoo lays an egg in some other bird's nest, and then when it hatches, it immediately pushes out all the other eggs. And that idea, it didn't learn from empiricism. It came about natively from its genetics. So I definitely think there are some native concepts, but most of them I definitely think would be empiricism results. Consciousness, dualism, 21%. That's surprising. Surprising for dualism. Uh, Liminativism, 4%, that makes sense. Like eliminating consciousness, I don't think makes a lot of sense. Identity theory, nah. Functionalism, yeah, it's a function of the brain, absolutely. Panpsychism, 7%. It's better than idealism. So, I mean, panpsychism beat out idealism. Dualism, though, that's a surprising number. Probably like property dualism rather than substance dualism, though.
Look at that, 22% dualists. Who would have thought that? I mean, I suppose that makes sense given how popular non-physicalism was about the mind, but even so, you don't imagine that 22% of philosophers are dualists. Although actually, it was, what was it, like 18% accepted theism. So I don't know, maybe that tracks.
Well, I guess because so theists are dualists, aren't they? That makes sense. Theists are dualists.
You don't imagine that 22%. Although actually, it was, what was it, like 18% accepted theism. So I don't know, maybe that tracks.
Continuum hypothesis. Does it have a determinate truth value, determinate or indeterminate? Continuum hypothesis. Let's Google what that is. Continuum hypothesis. Continuum hypothesis. In mathematics, the continuum hypothesis is a hypothesis about the possible size of infinite sets. It states, there is no set whose cardinality is strictly between that of integers and the real numbers. There is no set whose cardinality is strictly between that of the integers and the real numbers. And the question is, does it have a determinate value or not? The answer is yes. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's probably determinate. I think that numbers. I think that numbers do probably have a determinate value in the infinite sets. Yeah, genius. I think physicalism was way up at the top. Cosmological fine-tuning. What explains it? Design, 17%. All those silly theists. Multiverse, 15%. Brute fact. Brute fact, baby. Philosophers who accept brute facts, 32%. Brute facts, rects. More philosophers accept brute facts than design. More philosophers accept brute facts than theism. Brute facts are a thing. PSR is silly. Mentioned that many times before.
This was a real surprise to me. 32% of philosophers accept the brute fact view of fine-tuning. Now, this is surprising because, in my experience, philosophers don't like
unanswered questions.
Facts, right? They tend to try to avoid it. Philosophers love giving explanations. Brute facts are the last resort, right? Like that's what you do when there's just no other options. But in the case of cosmological fine-tuning, if you think that cosmological fine-tuning is a thing, and I actually don't, I selected no fine-tuning, but if you accept the claim that there is cosmological fine-tuning, I mean, we don't need to postulate brute facts here, right? We can come up with plausible explanations, like the multiverse. The multiverse is a perfectly intuitive, naturalistic explanation for cosmological fine-tuning, and maybe you don't want to actually accept it, right? Maybe you don't want to say that that's what actually happened, but then you can just be agnostic about it, right? You can just say, well, I don't know, right? I don't know what the reason for cosmological fine-tuning is, but we have on the table at least a plausible naturalistic explanation. So why the hell would you go for the brute fact view? I mean, bear in mind, right, that if you are adopting a brute fact view, you're already engaging in controversial metaphysical speculation, right? I mean, so even the claim that there are such things as brute facts, right, that is a controversial metaphysical claim, and then to identify a certain fact as a brute fact, that is certainly a controversial metaphysical claim.
Well, I mean, I understand his point here is totally true, like the idea that brute facts exist and that this is where the brute fact finally exists. But I think fundamentally the question here is more that is the fundamental constants of nature, whether the ones we know now or the ones we will find in the future, are those determined by something like the multiverse, or are they brute facts? And I think it's pretty much going to land on the brute fact case. Like even if we discover there's like another fundamental force of nature, like the multiverse, or like my hypothesis that all of the forces are interconnected by another undiscovered force, what determines that thing's properties? And I think it's probably going to land on brute fact. I think that's most likely going to be an answer that we're going to get to. Like if we say, what caused God's nature? I mean, brute fact is probably going to be the answer there. So I think it makes sense to land on brute fact as what is the final answer to all questions. It's the brute fact. And so it makes sense to me that philosophers would answer brute fact, though I tend to go with more like the multiverse approach. I think that the cause of the organization of the fine-tuning of the physics to allow for life is probably a result of some determinate force of nature that we haven't discovered yet. But when we ask what caused that force, I'm going to say brute fact, probably. Like identifying it as a brute fact probably is going to be tentative, but I think it's reasonable to say that what caused the fundamental forces is going to be a brute fact. So I can understand why that's an answer there, even though I'd lean towards undiscovered law of nature.
So if you're going to be engaging in metaphysical speculation anyway, then you might as well get something, get something for your trouble. You might as well get something out of it. You might as well give an explanation, like the multiverse explanation, that is, that sort of satisfies the mind's desire for understanding, that satisfies the mind's desire for a kind of pleasing picture of the world. Like, why would you adopt a brute fact view in this context? 32%? I mean, to me, right, this is like I'm sorry, but the brute fact view here, I feel it's a sort of loser position,
Oh, well, David, the 17% design is 18% are theists. So, I mean, 17% design makes a lot of sense. It's confusing where the other percent of the theists went. But yeah, so since like 18% of philosophers are theists, then 17% design makes perfect sense.
It's like you can either do
John Smith, that's what this is asking. So the cosmological fine-tuning is the laws of physics. Like, why are the laws of physics have the relationship that they do to allow for life? Why are the laws of physics the way they are? And the answer to why are the laws of physics the way they are, brute facts. That's the answer.
What I do and go for empiricism and like resist metaphysical speculation, right? And say you're not going to go in for that. Okay, that's one option. The other option is to go in for metaphysics. But if you're going to do metaphysics, at least be ambitious about it.
Be
like
ambitious.
At least give explanations. I mean, I don't see what the appeal is of accepting this position in this context. That was a surprise. That was a surprise to see so many philosophers accepting that. Interesting to see that the extended mind is doing so well, because I feel like that was a minority position. Only like extended mind is like 20. Yeah. That was a surprise. That was a surprise to see so many philosophers accepting that.
Environmental ethics, anthropocentric versus non-anthropocentric. Environmental ethics. How should we treat nature is determined by, similar to humans. Like, yeah, I don't really have any comment. I don't really have anything to comment on this one. Meh.
Yeah.
Extended mind, yes or no? What is the extended mind? Extended mind. David Chalmers' book. The extended mind thesis says that the mind does not exclusively reside in the brain or even the body, but extends into the physical world. So I think that would be like the problem of identity. What constitutes your mind, what constitutes the decision you make, is affected by like your biome, the bacteria in your gut, and those are affected by the food you eat and the air you breathe, and the chemicals in those. And so the things causing the processes that lead to your decisions may be external to more than just your brain. Also include your stomach and stuff. So I mean, I could go either way with that. I mean, I guess because I think it like the neurons in your stomach count there. So I'd go yeah.
Interesting to see that the extended mind is doing so well, because I feel like that was a minority position only like 20 years ago. And so for it to be, now like half philosophers accepting it, that's quite interesting.
Foundations of mathematics: constructivism, intuitionism, formalism, logicism, structuralism, or set theory. Structuralism. What is structuralism? Structuralism, and mathematics. Mathematics. Structuralism, mathematics. As its name suggests, methodological structuralism concerns the methodology of mathematics, the mathematical practice. I can do like copy, paste, Control F. As its name, Control C, Control F, V. As its name suggests, methodological structuralism concerns the methodology of mathematics, thus mathematical practice. Or as one might also put it, it concerns the certain style of doing mathematics. The style consists of studying whole systems or structural objects in terms, global, relational, or structural properties. This can be done in two main ways, often intertwined in practice by proceeding axiomatically, i.e. by deriving theorems from basic axioms for the systems at issue, and by considering homomorphisms, isomorphisms, together with invariants under those morphisms, like shapes and shit. So, I mean, I would go with, I tend to like the first one. I like constructionism, but since I do think it describes reality, definitely not formalism, because logicism, no, it's not based on logic. That was the Russell's paradox. I think I'd go with structuralism, where it's more just describing patterns and structures of reality. Yeah. I mean, others 40%. That's interesting. Others, the 40% one. Gender categories. Should we preserve gender categories? 20% say yes. Meaning, so this, the question here is gender categories as sex. Gender and sex. So gender has been used as synonymous with sex throughout most time. It's pretty much always meant sex. Gender and sex, synonyms. So to preserve gender categories means to use gender as synonymous with sex. Male, female. Man, woman, those kinds of things. To revise them would mean to add in more genders, like all the other genders added in. To eliminate them, we just get rid of gender as a concept altogether. I think it's up to the individual. I'm happy to think that as a gender category, you can choose to adopt them or to revise them or to eliminate them from your personal vocabulary. And I think that each individual group has the right to decide that for themselves, but no group should be able to determine what other groups do. So if your particular group chooses to preserve them, that's fine. If your group chooses to revise them, that's fine. Or if your group chooses to eliminate them, that's fine, but you do not get to determine what other groups do. I think that's the problem with the SJW woke communities. They're trying to force other groups to adopt their preferred usage of language. Grounds, God damn it, going too far. Grounds of intentionality: causal, teleological, inferential, interpretational, phenomenal, or primitive. Grounds of intentionality. Causal. I would go with causal. I don't like the word teleological there because it's associated with God, but I'd probably go with causal.
Yeah, so
Hard problem of consciousness. Is there one? Yes. So hard problem of consciousness is the idea that the easy problem of consciousness is what physical features of the brain correlate to ideas. The hard problem of consciousness is how does the brain produce the ideas? Like how do the ideas, like the color of red, actually arise in the brain? That's a hard problem. It definitely is a hard problem. I don't know how to solve it. It's a very, very difficult problem.
I don't have a lot to say about most of these.
Human genetic engineering, permissible or impermissible? Absolutely permissible. Like the primary argument against human genetic engineering is that the rich people will get further ahead. So if you're rich, you can afford to genetically modify your baby such that it will be smarter, faster, stronger, et cetera, and that will give it an advantage in society over the poor people, which that's true, it will. And will it be unfair to the poor people? Sure, it'll be unfair to the poor people, but that doesn't mean that we should relegate the baby, the rich baby, to a life of lesser happiness, lesser freedom, just because other people won't be able to have the same level of freedom. So I think that yes, genetic engineering permissible. We should absolutely do it. 100% genetically engineer everybody to make them better.
I mean, it's interesting to see what philosophers think. But
Hume, what is his view? Skeptic or naturalist? I have no idea. I don't know what Hume thinks. I mean, I guess naturalist because it's Hume. He talks about naturalism enough. Immortality. Would you choose it? Yes, I would absolutely choose it. I mean, I think the question would be is consensual immortality. Like if you could be immortal, but then choose to turn it off to kill yourself if you so wanted to. But if you could choose immortality and then get stuck in a black hole, that would suck. So I think the thing there would be as long as it's consensual immortality and you can choose to turn it off whenever. If it's non-consensual immortality and you can get stuck in situations, that would be risky. That would definitely be risky if you could choose immortality and get stuck in like the sun or something. Go back. I wish I could go like back by like frames. Justification, coherentism, infinitism, non-reliabilist foundationalism, or reliabilism. Reliabilism, coherentism, because like this is the Agrippa's trilemma is something foundationalism, infinite regress, or dogmatism. Foundationalism, infinite regress, or circular reasoning, essentially. Reliabilism, I think I like the best. It's corresponds to reality pretty much. Coherentism, I don't like. Coherentism suffers from the problem of being self-referential to your own ideas, circular reasoning. So like if your own ideas, if it makes sense to you, then it's coherent, and then that's a way to justify your belief in it, which I don't think that works. I don't think the fact that it's coherent to you makes sense. Infinitism, just infinite regress, obviously not. Non-reliabilist foundationalism, it's not bad, but I like reliabilism. I like reliabilism, the fact that your ideas, testable prediction, novel testable prediction is reliabilism. It says if your beliefs can lead to some positive consequence in the world, which is reliably testable, some kind of effect that we can predict, that's the justification. So yeah, I think reliabilism, novel testable predictions.
It's a shame that only 2% of people are infinitists. It kind of makes me want to become an infinitist when I see that the position is that unpopular. But unfortunately, my beliefs don't work like that. I can't just pick them. I really wish I could just become an infinitist. Maybe I should start reading loads of infinitist literature, and I can kind of nudge myself in that direction. Because I mean, only 2%. There needs to be more people speaking up for infinitism. I mean, infinitism isn't that bad. It's certainly better than fucking reliabilism at like 34%. Jesus.
Kant, what is his view? One world for two world? Like what? I'm assuming this is talking about nominal phenomenal distinction. Kant, one world problem. Kant's transcendental idealism, one object or two. What are Kant's two worlds? Kant argues that sensibility and understanding are directed at two different worlds. Sensibility gives us access to the sensible world, while understanding gives us a grasp of distinct intelligible world. That's interesting. I don't really care about Kant's view, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Damn it. Too far. No, too far again.
Liberalism at like 34%. Jesus. Yeah.
Law, legal positivism, or legal non-positivism. positivism, as if legal positivism. Legal positivism is the thesis that the existence and content of law depends on social fact and not its merits. Legal non-positivism. Non-positivism is the most radical version of non-positivism? Oh, exclusive non-positivism. It is a claim that every injustice, every moral defect of a norm precludes it being legally valid, it being law. Classical version of the view expressed by Augustine's statement that law that is not just would not seem to be law. I don't understand the positions there. Material composition, nihilism, restrictivism, or universalism. Material composition, restrictivism, material composition, material composition, restrictivism. Material composition, restrictivism. Oh, what? Not finding anything. Material composition. Nihilism. Material composition, there we go. Compositional restrictivism. There is one very, very compelling reason to think that the variety of compositional restrictivism must be true. Common sense. That's not a very good reason. On first inspection, it seems obvious that composition is restricted. That is, it occurs sometimes, but not all the time. After all, one does not need to engage in much serious reflection to realize that the Eiffel Tower, for instance, is composed of iron girdles and that the Great Pyramid is composed of limestone blocks. Yet equally obvious the fact that there is no object which these two great edifices together compose. That is, there is no object which has just the Eiffel Tower and Great Pyramid of Giza as parts. So, since it is plainly evident that there are some cases which objects do compose and other cases which they do not, seems plainly evident that composition must be restricted, as opposed to like everything is composed of the same thing. Problem of identity. Where does composition end? So nihilism, and universalism being nihilism. There is no composition. Universalism means everything is composed together as a single subset. Interesting. I don't know. I guess pragmatically, like, yeah, restrictivism works. But is there like actually an object there? I don't know. Meta-ontology, heavyweight realism, deflationary realism, anti-realism. Meta-ontology. What is meta-ontology? Meta-ontology. 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 Meta-ontology is the study of the field of inquiry known as ontology. So it's the study of ontology. All right. Meta-ontology. Heavyweight realism. Heavyweight realism. In the currently thriving field of first-order ontology, the most popular view is heavyweight realism, with a minority of lightweight realists and anti-realists. Heavyweight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First, heavyweight realists. Van Inwagen. Ooh. Which answers to ontological questions are highly non-trivial and reflect the ultimate furniture of the world. So yeah, like answers to ontology, do they describe reality as itself? Yes. I would say yes.
So here are the
method in history of philosophy. Which do you prefer? Analytic, rational, reconstruction, or contextual, historical? Analytic, rational. I think that more the concepts of rationalism and analytic thought better describe how philosophy evolves rather than historical contextual, because like we can look at the differences between the historical and contextual philosophy of other cultures, which hasn't made nearly as much progress as Western culture because of its connection to the analytic rational constructions. So I think that, yeah, just going based off of logic and analytic reasoning is the better understanding of philosophy rather than historical.
The other things that I don't really.
Method in political philosophy. Which do you prefer, ideal theory or non-ideal theory? Political, I don't know what that means. Oh, yeah, political theory. Idealism is the idea that there's a perfect society, like the best of all possible worlds. And we should move towards the best of all possible worlds, whereas non-idealism is more just like a pragmatic approach. I mean, because political theory deals more in pragmatics. So, I mean, I can understand the non-ideal theory. And taking an ideal theory as a guide would be hard because you have to limit to the pragmatic limitations of our society. So I can grant non-ideal theory as the better political approach because we can't get towards the ideal theory. We're so far from it. Using it as a basis is very rough. Does that make sense?
We have many thoughts on.
Mind uploading, brain replaced by digital emulation, survive or death. So if we uploaded our brain to a computer, would we survive or would we die? I think if we could discover what consciousness is, if we can discover the physical process of what consciousness is in the brain, if it's some kind of an electrical signal or electrical pattern signal, and we can take that electrical pattern signal and cause it to go through a wire, then I think we could survive. I think it's possible to survive. I think if we just copied it, then it would lead to death. But if we could actually transition the electrical signal from our brain to the computer, the concurrent electrical signal that's going on in our brain, and then just move it to the computer, I think we would technically survive. I don't think your brain is your mind exactly. So like there's parts of your brain is your mind. The part of your brain, which is the electrical signals that is interacting with producing your consciousness, if we could transition that and replace, like, think about replacing each individual neuron with a computer chip one at a time. If we could replace each neuron one at a time, like Theseus's ship, and just take one piece and replace it, and one piece and replace it, and one piece and replace it, I think you would survive. So I think that it is possible to upload your brain into a digital emulation slowly. Theseus's ship style, one at a time.
Okay. Oh, now this was interesting. Only 5% of people accept error theory.
Because they're dumb.
Philosophers. Now,
so he's not showing the question here on the page. The top of the page, you can't see it. I don't like it when it does that. Show the page. No, that's not it. Oh, God damn it. Passed it again.
Things that I don't really have many thoughts on.
Let's do this. Moral principles. Moral generalism or moral particularism.
Okay.
No, here it is. Moral. Did we just skip that question? I think we just skipped the question.
So here are the.
We did that one.
Other things.
Moral political philosophy. Did that one.
I don't really have many thoughts on.
Mind uploading. We did that one. Moral principles. Moral generalism versus moral particularism. So that means that, is there like a particular principle itself that is objectively true, or is it more just general statements? I think I'd lean toward particularism because I have my principle: any involuntary imposition of will is immoral, and I think that is a moral particular. Pretty sure. Let's check that to make sure that's right. Moral particular. Moral generalism. Moral generalism. According to moral generalism, moral principles can and do play the roles. Why is there a period there? Moral principles play important roles. Can I? No, I can't do that. Let's adjust our page. Moral generalists think morality is best understood in the terms of moral principles. The moral particularists deny this. To many people, ordinary moral practice seems suffused with principles. Keep your promises, do not steal, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. To many moral theorists, the central task of moral theory has been to articulate and defend moral principles, or perhaps a single ultimate moral principle. Single ultimate moral principle, hell yeah. Maximize impersonal happiness. Impersonal happiness. Act only on the maxims that can be willed as universal laws. The debate between particularists and generalists thus has the potential to force the reassessment of both moral theory and moral practice. Moral generalists think morality is best understood in terms of moral principles. Moral particularists deny this. So yeah, I think it is. I think that the job of moral theory is to give principles to describe morality, or at least that's a stepping stone in morality. It's an interesting question. Like, I don't think the moral principles are themselves the morality, but I think the job of moral theories is to try to describe those principles. So the epistemology of morality would be to give the principles, because that's the best way to express them to us to interact with. But I don't think that morality itself is entailed in the principles. I think the principles describe the morality like laws describe physics. So I could go either way on this one.
Okay.
Morality, non-naturalism, natural realism, constructivism, expressivism, or error theory. So naturalist morality, natural realism, 31%, baby. Yeah. Non-naturalism, that's theism. So theism is the top one, the one that's right there. That's theism, or similar theism, non-natural theistic models. Naturalism wins. Yes. Naturalism. Consensus in philosophy, not consensus, but slight majority. Constructivism, constructed morality, that's subjectivism. Expressivism, just a description of our feelings. Error theory, silly error theorists. All those crazy, silly error theorists with this stupid error theory. Discord ideal error theorists, idealists and error theorists. Just stupid positions.
Oh, now this was interesting. Only 5% of people accept error theory. Only 5% of professional philosophers. Now this was surprising to me because there's two reasons. So the first reason is just when I look at the contemporary literature, it seems like a lot of the debate is kind of organised around error theory. I mean, there are like prominent anti-realists who are error theorists. Richard Joyce, I guess, is one of the most prominent figures in like meta-ethics who defends anti-realism. He's an error theorist. You've got Jonas Olson, you've got Bart Strumer. And then, of course, going back a bit more, you've got Mackey and Roos and people like that. But, error theory has always... So for quite a while, error theory has been a major position in the debate, and it seems like there are lots of people writing now who are defending error theory. And when you look at the way in which people have talked about things like the companions and guilt argument, it seems to be framed in terms of error theory. At least much of the literature seems to be framed in those terms. So one reason why this is surprising is just because, I just thought, on the basis of reading the literature, that there were more error theorists. Another reason why it's surprising is that there are plenty of people who have anti-realist intuitions. I mean, I know that anti-realism is not the popular position among professional philosophers, but it's still a significant minority. It was, still like a quarter. That's a lot of people. Among lay people, I think you find the same thing. I imagine that at least a quarter of lay people are anti-realists. In fact, I would imagine it's probably more. So, there's a lot of people with anti-realist inclinations. And if you have anti-realist inclinations, it seems like error theory is the natural position. Because, error theory is the cognitivist view. And the cognitivist analysis of moral statements, well, that's just taking them at face value, right? Somebody says slavery is wrong. If you just look at that in terms of its surface grammar, it seems to be attributing a property to an action, right? It seems analogous to a claim like grass is green, right? So cognitivism is, in that respect, it seems the most intuitive. Like, it seems to be just taking moral statements at face value. And certainly, there's obviously then there are technical philosophical arguments. There are technical problems for non-cognitivism, like the Frege-Geach problem. There's the fact that we've got a lot more work. Sort of the prospects for truth conditional semantics are often thought to be better than for like expressivist semantics, whatever, right? So there are these technical issues, but it's just intuitively I would have thought more people would be attracted to error theory. I mean, 5% in favor of error theory. Error theory is as popular as relativism about knowledge. Think about that, because how unpopular relativism about knowledge is, right? That's where error theory is. That's what. Oh my god, man, error theory.
Yup, it's a joke, just like idealism. But it's the popular thing on Discord debates. The Jack Engstreich of the dualists, idealists, error theorists, garbo.
Error theorists are not doing well. I thought they were doing better than that.
Normative concepts, which is most fundamental? Fit, ought, reason, or value? Ooh. So yeah, oughts not required. As I said, like I bring this up all the time. In normative concepts, you don't need the oughts. The oughts aren't important. So this one, I'm really glad about this question, because it's definitely super helpful in expressing like what oughts are what is normativity. Do you need an ought for normativity? Answer is no, you don't need freaking oughts. Stupid. The value part is like your subjective values, which I guess makes sense to normative concepts and understanding why you ought to do something. So yeah, oughts are stupid. You don't need those stinking oughts, silly oughts, dumb. Fit is just evolutionary fitness. Meh. I don't think those are. Meh. Reasons are good. Reasons are a good answer. You can have philosophical reasons to make something normative without any kind of values or oughts. I like reasons a lot. I like reasons very, very much.
Okay.
Other minds are what other animals have minds other than humans? That's what this question is. What? Go back. This.
How unpopular relativism about knowledge is, right? That's where error theory is.
Error theory is dumb.
Let's
go. Other minds. Which groups are conscious? So it's asking which animals are conscious. Adult humans. 95% of philosophers think adult humans are conscious. That's concerning. 0.18% think they're not. That's interesting. There's a solipsist in there somewhere. Cats. I'm so disappointed dogs are not on this list. There needs to be a cats and a dogs. Like this is an important distinction here, which is cats, which is dogs. 4% reject cats are conscious. I definitely think cats are conscious. I definitely think fish are conscious.
Okay. Yeah. Other
flies. I think flies are conscious. I think worms are probably conscious. Worms are where I'm starting to feel like maybe.
It's kind of funny when you first read this and you sort of see like only 95% of philosophers accept that adult humans have other minds, have minds. But then, of course, it's actually not surprising, is it? Because there are illusionists like Keith Frankish, there are eliminative materialists. So, of course, only 95% of philosophers accept that adult humans have minds. Or at least are conscious. That's what the question is, right? For which groups are
same thing,
conscious?
Conscious mind, same thing.
I have to say, right, this is...
Plants, 7% think plants are conscious. That is ridiculous. No, plants are not conscious. That's dumb. No brain, no consciousness.
Not based on any...
Freaking panpsychists and idealists, and that's 7.
Anything, but it's just a brute intuition.
Particles.
But I'm just going to express it because why the hell not? My feeling is that consciousness is either... like very, very special. So it's either restricted to, cognitively sophisticated humans, let's say. So humans who are able to, engage in conceptual thought, humans who have language, who can have thoughts about thoughts, like higher order thoughts. So consciousness is either restricted to beings like that, or it's just everywhere. It's like even particles have some sort of consciousness.
Particles, freaking idealists. No, that is proto-conscious. No. Newborn babies, yeah, okay. Current AI systems, no. I wouldn't say current AI systems. Future AI systems, definitely.
And the universe is just saturated with consciousness in the way it's saturated with mass. Like the panpsychists are right. I don't know why. I don't know why that's my view, but it is. I think consciousness.
Yeah, future AI systems, definitely.
This is either something very, very special, or it's something that is just everywhere. So yeah, that's my intuition, and obviously that's
ought implies can. So this is you can only be obligated to do something if you are capable of doing it. That's what this is asking. Like, you ought to flip the switch only if you're capable of flipping the switch. And there's a valid point here. Like, if you're a paraplegic, saying you ought to go save a drowning baby seems kind of rough, because obviously a paraplegic can't swim. They can't save the drowning baby. They're literally incapable of doing it. So saying ought implies can makes sense in the pragmatic case. Now, this would be a problem for my morality if I would have oughts as objective. If it was you are objectively ought to save the baby and you're a paraplegic, then you're immoral for not saving the baby. But clearly, since my model doesn't have oughts, it's totally fine to say that ought implies can, because it's only a subjective variable in your pragmatic view of morality. Since it's not a part of objective morality, it's not really a problem.
Completely epistemically worthless, but
philosophical knowledge, is there any? None, little, or a lot? Wow, philosophers say there is a lot in a philosophical question. Philosophical knowledge. I guess so. I think philosophical knowledge is a knowledge of languages. It's a knowledge of categorizing things. So I guess I'd say there's a lot of different ways to categorize things. Sure, lots of distinctions. I think the distinctions are legitimate philosophical knowledge. A priori, posteriori, synthetic, analytic, noumena, phenomena, those kinds of things. Manifest for scientific image. I think there's a lot of philosophical knowledge about categories.
That's what it is. Oh, look at this. Again, another shocking result, that the survey of professional philosophers, of people who are employed to do philosophy, only 3.6% of them think that there's no philosophical knowledge. What could possibly explain that, other than the fact that the arguments for philosophical knowledge are so overwhelmingly powerful? There just couldn't be any other explanation.
I skipped the Plato. Don't skip the Plato. What is the Plato one?
Be any other.
Plato, what is his view? What is Plato's view? Knowledge only of forms, or knowledge also of concrete things? I have no idea. Platonic objects are you can only have knowledge of platonic objects, or you can also have knowledge of concrete things? I have no idea what his view is.
Explanation.
Politics, capitalism, or socialism? Oh, disgusting. Freaking 50% social commies. No. Socialism is garbage. Capitalism for the win. Capitalism is the only legitimate position. The reason socialism does not work is the reason a lottery where everyone gets paid the same does not work. So if there's a lottery and every person who enters gets paid the same amount, you would buy in for $1, and they'd have to pay the people who ran the lottery, and then you'd get some percent back, which is probably 80%. You get 80 cents back. No one would buy into this lottery system. Zero people would be spend $1 to get a lottery ticket that's going to give you 80% back. What motivates people is the goal to overcome. The goal to overcome everybody else. You want to be better. You want to be the winner, the successful one. And that's what gets society going. That's what keeps society moving forward, because people want to do better. People want to be at the top. If there was no competition, no people at the top, then that would be bad for society. So you need the competition. You need the people to win. You need somebody who can win, and people who want to be that person who wins, which is what drives society. Socialism is garbage, but mixed economy. I'm happy with a mixed economy though. How do you do egalitarianism and capitalism? Abacus powers. Well, egalitarianism is just everybody has equal rights. So having equal rights is egalitarianism. what you do with those rights is what capitalism is. So there wouldn't be a contradiction between being egalitarian and capitalist. Possible worlds, abstract, concrete, non-existent. Possible worlds, abstract, concrete, or non-existent. Possible worlds are abstract objects like numbers. Sure. Non-existent. Maybe. I mean, I like that there's such a high percent of philosophers who say possible worlds are non-existent, because possible world semantics is so stupid. But I'm happy to grant it's like an abstract object, like a hypothetical. It's fine.
A real shame to see that modal realists form only about 4.5%
Modal ontological realism is the position that possible worlds actually exist.
of philosophers. I feel like there should be more modal realists. You know, modal realism is sexy, okay? That's all, it just is. Modal realism is wrong, but it's sexy. I mean, moral realism isn't even sexy, but modal realism is. So there should be more modal realists. Have you read On the Plurality of Worlds? It's a wonderful book. It's totally wrong. I mean, completely wrong. But I kind of admire it. I feel like if you're going to go in for this sort of stuff, like I say, if you're going to do metaphysics, it was like I said with respect to the cosmological fine-tuning thing. If you're going to do metaphysics, just be ambitious about it. You just go for it, man. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to believe in abstract objects and moral facts and all that bullshit, then you might as well believe in concrete possible worlds. And then you can enter the philosophical paradise that they will open up for you.
I don't really have a position on this one. Back a little bit more. That's probably
moral facts and all that bullshit. Then you might as well believe in concrete possible worlds.
That's a good quote.
And then you can enter the philosophical paradise that they will open up for you.
Damn it, he goes way too fast there. So practical knowledge. That's what it says, practical knowledge. Is practical knowledge Humean, Aristotelian, or Kantian? I don't have a position on this. I don't really know. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. Principle of sufficient reason. This one's an interesting one. Principle of sufficient reason. True or false? Most philosophers say false. False. Principle of sufficient reason, not required in philosophy. Most philosophers rejected this. I actually said this in multiple debates. I said most philosophers reject the principle of reason, and the person's like, oh, you can't provide that. That's wrong. Freaking silly theists thinking their principle of sufficient reason is good when it's actually garbage, and most philosophers reject it. PSR, garbage. Garbage.
Very surprised to see 35% accepting the principle of sufficient
Surprised to see they accept it because it's garbage.
Reason. That I did not expect, because, I mean, I don't know, I don't feel like most philosophers appeal to, or at least it seems like most philosophers try to avoid appealing to this kind of thing. But, you know, yeah, apparently I'm wrong about that.
Properties, classes, immanent universals, transcendental universals, tropes, or non-existent. I don't know what that means. Properties, classes. Transcendent universals. That's a really high one. Immanent universals. What is an immanent universal? Immanent universal. Immanent universal. A-nent, not I-nent. M-a-nent. Moderate realism, also called immanent realism, is a position in the debate on metaphysics of universals which hold that there is no realm in which universals exist. Me likes. In opposition to Platonic realism, which asserts the existence of abstract objects, nor do they really exist with particulars as universals. Okay, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with immanent universals where there is no real place where they exist. I'm okay with this. No place in which universals actually exist. It's just abstractions. Propositional attitudes. Dispositional, phenomenal, representational, or non-existent. Propositional attitudes. Propositional attitude, psychological state usually expressed by a verb that may take a subordinate clause beginning with that as a complement. Believe, hope, fear, desire, intend, know. Disposition. Dispositional means like your desires, your feelings. Phenomenal, meaning some kind of thing in your brain, some brain state. Representational or non-existent would be a hard choice here. Representational of your brain state. I like. Thank you, MLB McKinsey. Appreciate it. Propositional sets. Structured entities, simple entities, or non-existent. Propositional sets. Propositional sets. Propositions. Sets, structured entities. What's a structured entity? Structured entity. Structured entity. A structured entity is an entity that has been designed so that voting or similar rights. Yeah, voting rights. Philosophy. Structured entity philosophy. Structured propositions. Roughly, to say that propositions are structured is to say that they are complex entities, parts, having parts or constituents. I don't think I'd say. I don't think so. I'd say non-existent or sets, structured entities, simple entities, or non-existent. I'd probably go with non-existent. Acts. What is an act? How could it be an act? Simple entities. Simple entities. Simple entity might fit. Fundamental entities. Entities that are not identical. No. Thank you, huge ass. Clearly what that says. Huge ass. I'm going to go with non-existent. I don't think propositions exist. I think they're just formulations of things.
Right.
Quantum mechanics, collapse, hidden variable, many worlds, or epistemic. This is dumb. So hidden variable, like 20% accept the hidden variable. That's so silly. Like in philosophy, or in physics, it's like the opposite. Like nobody accepts hidden variable. I should probably do another one analyzing the physics questions one too. Definitely probably do that. Do a poll. I should probably just do this more often. I should probably just do, if I have a poll of the consensus in a field, I should go through and just go through all the questions and give my thoughts on it. I'll probably do that from now on. I'll probably do one on the physics one next. But yeah, I'd say, so epistemic is that it's a real thing we don't know about yet. It's caused by something we just don't know about. So it's epistemic ignorance. We just don't know. Many worlds hypothesis. I don't like that. I like multiverse better than many worlds. Hidden variables are essentially rejected wholesale in physics. There's no hidden variables. Collapse. Yeah, collapse is like there's actually a wave and it actually collapses due to some like measurement thing, but that's the consensus in physics.
Would be interesting to compare that to a similar poll for physicists.
I have it saved.
I
probably should pull that up. I should probably just pull that up and show it right now. Just show that one question. Others, physics, foundational attitudes towards quantum mechanics, studies in history and philosophy, a snapshot of foundational attitudes in quantum mechanics. I'll zoom out. Hidden. Let's do hidden variables. Control F. Hidden determinism, 0%. So this is essentially the closest question on the paper to the same question, which is, what is your opinion on the randomness of individual quantum events? Like the collapse of individual quantum randomness, such as the decay of a radioactive atom. Randomness is only apparent. That's the epistemic question. So that's the bottom one, the accept or lead epistemic. So it's like 9% physicists, 12% philosophers. Hidden determinism. Hidden determinism is the hidden variable. The 21% of philosophers, 0% of physicists. Randomness is irreducible. That means that randomness is a real thing. Randomness is itself a fundamental force in physics. Randomness is irreducible. Or it's not, it's just a thing. It's just something that happens. And then that would be the opposite of epistemic. Maybe collapse, probably be in the collapse variable. Probably going to be in the collapse variable. Randomness is a fundamental concept. Randomness itself is a force of nature. That's a really interesting one. The physicists think that randomness is itself a fundamental force in nature. That is phenomenal. Like randomness is irreducible and randomness is itself a fundamental thing. That is such a strange conclusion of physicists. Like I was always of the position it was like epistemic and just there's a hidden variable or something that we're going to know about in the future. And it's like, but when I found this poll, I was like, wow, physicists think randomness is a real thing. Holy shit. So I was just, as somebody who pretty much adopts the consensus, I was like, all right, let's go with the consensus. Randomness is a thing. Okay, then.
I actually was sent a poll of physicists, and there were differences. In the poll that was sent to me, only about 5% of physicists accepted many worlds, for instance.
Same poll as you showed.
So, again, yeah, just interesting to think about the differences there.
I'd probably I can pull up the many worlds question too. Let's see. Physics, snapshot of foundational attitudes. Control F, many worlds. There you go. Oh, it must be a different poll because this one is only collapse caused by the observer consciousness, 6% consciousness. All right, let's go here. Doink. What is your favorite interpretation of quantum mechanics? Copenhagen interpretation, 42%. Many worlds is 18%. Information based is 24%. Objective collapse, it's like hidden variable. So many worlds is 18% on this one, and many worlds is 19% on that one. So that's actually pretty close. Is there another mention to that somewhere? No, that's it. All right.
In the previous video,
I clicked the wrong button there. All right. Race categories. Race, preserve, revise, or eliminate. Revise. Do you see this? Do you see this shit? Revise. I've talked about this many times before, like in my debate with Vaush, I think. I didn't do very well in that one because I hadn't done much thinking about it at the time. It's kind of off the cuff. But yeah, so race as a term, as a folk concept doesn't make much sense. Like thinking of race as in Asian, white, black, Mexican, whatever, those aren't right. But it does refer to something in reality. It refers to ecoclines. So revising race to make it correspond to ecoclines makes a lot of sense. Getting rid of race, like what the social woke SJW community say, it's just a made up concept that we should eliminate, is bullcrap. Like it does refer to something. It makes perfect sense to say race is a real thing that corresponds to ecoclines in reality. And so I think revising the concept of race to make it mirror more what we already know is a better methodology than getting rid of it. Preserving it, yeah, I don't know. I don't think we should preserve it in its current incarnation. It doesn't really make much sense to preserve it in its folk concept. Rational disagreement. Can two people with the same evidence rationally disagree? I guess. I mean, because if we take knowledge to be contextual, where based on your prior knowledge, you can have different justifications based off of the current information you have. I mean, I guess so. So like, yeah, like the parents in Santa Claus example, like if your parents say Santa is real and the parents and the presents show up underneath the tree, and then later on you realize, oh no, that was just a fairy tale or whatever. Yeah, since knowledge is contextual, I think it is possible, permissive, that you can disagree with the same information.
Yeah.
Response to external world skepticism. So external world skepticism is we live in the matrix, solipsism, idealism. So this is the how philosophers think is the best response to how do we live in the matrix argument. Abductive is the highest one, or oh no, it's not the highest one. There's another one. Pragmatic is higher. So abductive is the second highest one. What is the best explanation? Abduction is kind of affirming the consequent fallacy, so I don't really think that's a great answer, but I mean, but it's weird. Contextualism, not great. Dogmatism. Well, dogmatism is terrible. It's like, we're not in the matrix. Ha ha ha. Dogmatism. Not the great. Epistemic externalist. So in order to gain knowledge, the external world would have to be there. That's an okay answer.
Okay, yeah, response.
Pragmatic. 22%. Pragmatic wins. It's like, it works, bitches. That's the answer.
To external world skepticism. So, interesting, I think, that only 10%, or closer to 11%, I suppose, accepted contextualism. Because if you recall the question about knowledge, most respondents were contextualists. At least I think, what was it? Something like, I can't remember actually. Was it like 40% or something, or 50% even? I don't remember. Well, whatever it was, I feel like there were a lot of contextualists with respect to knowledge claims, and of course, contextualism historically has been applied in response to external world skepticism. But it seems here it's actually not a very popular move. I don't think contextualism works as a response to external world skepticism. I have a video on that, but it is. That is how it has been applied. And I think that most people, when they encounter contextualism, they probably encounter it for the first time in the context of the response to external world skepticism. At least that was the case for me when I was learning epistemology. So it is interesting to see that contextualism is so popular, and yet so few people are sort of inclined to use it as a response to the skeptic. Actually, even the abductive response, although it's one of the more popular responses here, I would have thought that would be more popular. Induction, inference to the best explanation, and abduction, that's in vogue at the moment, and it does have an obvious application as a response to skepticism. Again, I don't think it works. Personally, I suppose more inclined to a sort of pragmatic response. But yeah, I would have thought that the abductive and contextualist responses would be more popular. I feel like whenever when I've read sort of introductions to skepticism and stuff, they always seem to be the sort of those kinds of moves always seem to be among the more popular ones. Anyway.
Semantic content, which expressions are content dependent. Minimalism, no more than a few. Moderate contextualism, intermediate, and radical contextualism, most or all. Which expressions are context dependent? Interesting. I'd definitely go for most or all, like Gava Guy. Lots of like the sentence that if someone points at a rabbit, says Gava Guy, what are they referring to? Definitely could be context dependent. I think it's definitely more context dependent than like few, like I think there's very few words that aren't context dependent. Whoops. Sleeping Beauty, woken once if heads, woken twice if tails, credence on heads, waking. What is that? I don't know what this is in reference to. Sleeping Beauty, woken once if heads. Sleeping Beauty problem. Sleeping Beauty problem is a puzzle in decision theory in which whenever an ideally rational epistemic agent is woken from sleep, she has no memory of whether she has been awoken before. Upon being told that she has been woken once or twice, according to the toss of a coin, once if heads, twice if tails, she is asked her degree of belief for the coin having come up heads. Their problem. Sleeping Beauty volunteers to undergo the following experiment and is told all of the following details. On Sunday, she will be put to sleep. Once or twice during what? On Sunday, she'll be put to sleep. Once or twice during the experiment, Sleeping Beauty will be awakened and interviewed and put back to sleep with an amnesia-inducing drug that makes her forget that she was awakened. A fair coin will be tossed to determine which experimental procedure to undertake. If the coin comes up heads, Sleeping Beauty will be awakened and interviewed on Monday only. If the coin comes up tails, she will be awakened and interviewed on Monday and Tuesday. In either case, she will be awakened on Wednesday without interview and the experiment ends. Anytime Sleeping Beauty is awakened and interviewed, she will not be able to tell which day it is or whether she has been awakened before. During the interview, Sleeping Beauty is asked, what is your credence, or confidence, that the proposition the coin landed heads? One third, one half. What is the probability the coin landed heads? Tails, it'll be Monday and Tuesday. Heads will be just Monday. Tails will be Monday and Tuesday. 50-50. I don't really have a position. Yeah, other. Let's go with other.
Yeah.
Space-time. Relational or substantive? So this is interesting. Substantival. What? Substantival. Substantivalism? I don't know. What word does that mean? Substantivalism. Substantivalism is the view that space exists in addition to any material bodies situated within it. Relationalism is the opposing view that there is no such thing as space. There are just material bodies spatially related to one another. This paper assesses the issues, blah, blah, blah. Does space-time exist independently of the objects within it or only as a relation between the objects within it? I'd say it's substantive. I'd say that, yeah, space-time exists. Space-time is a thing, and I think that's the consensus in physics. Space-time substantively exists as a thing. I think that relationalism is not so much. Unless you think it's like emergent from some other quantum field or something, but I think space-time exists.
Yeah, well.
Statue and lump, one thing or two things. So I think that's the idea that if you have a lump of clay and you mold it into a statue, is the lump and clay two separate things or one thing? I don't really have a position on that. I guess they're two separate things because the statue would be a combination of lesser parts of the lump.
Kind of coming.
Temporal ontology, presentism, eternalism, or growing block. Eternalism. Ha! Ha! You silly theists. Eternalism. Freaking. What's it? The infinite regress paradoxes can suck it. The Grim Reaper paradox can suck it. Eternalism. Philosophers, eternalism. We can use this one against the silly theists who think eternalism leads to paradoxes.
To the end now.
Theory of reference, causal, descriptive, or deflationary. Causal. Theory of reference. 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 According to descriptives, theories of proper names. A direct reference theory is a theory of language that claims that meaning of a word or expression lies in what it points out in the world. Yes. So this is a description theory. Theories of reference are theories of the words. Do the words refer to some causal thing, descriptive thing, or deflationary thing?
Do I have
time travel? Metaphysically possible, metaphysically impossible. Metaphysically possible. I think it's possible. Like, given Einstein's general special relativity, time travel is possible if you could like travel fast enough. I think, at least for light. For light, it's possible. Interesting question.
Anything more to say?
True contradictions. Oof. Possible, 4%. Actual, 12%. Actual. There are true contradictions, and they are actual 12%. That's a funny one. Like, wow. 12% think actual contradictions exist. Impossible for true contradictions.
Well, it is nice to see that dialetheism is on 12%. I mean, it's still a minority position, but who would have thought of that?
Well, that's more paraconsistent logic, so you don't need dialetheism, because dialetheism says everything can entail true contradictions. Paraconsistent logic can have true contradictions, but they're only in some specific cases. So I'd say I think that's more representative of paraconsistent logic than dialetheism.
40 years ago, 50 years ago, who would have predicted that in 2021, 12% of professional philosophers accept that there are true contradictions? Isn't that wonderful? I mean, Graham Priest has really done a good job there.
Units of selection, genes or organisms? Selfish gene. Interesting. Values in science. Is ideal scientific reasoning necessarily sensitive or insensitive to non-epistemic values? Value ladenness, I think, yeah. Necessarily value laden. Because I definitely think our psychology definitely has an impact. Our values definitely impact how we think, for sure. Value ladenness. Go back. Too fast.
21. 12% of professional philosophers accept that there are true contradictions.
NJS, I do read philosophy. You can check my philosophical reading list. You're an idiot.
Isn't that wonderful? I mean, Graham Priest has really done a good job there.
Well-being, hedonism, experientialism, desire satisfaction, or objective list. I don't know what objective list means here.
Yeah.
Wittgenstein, which do you prefer, early or late? Late is more entertaining. His Tractatus, where he says all philosophy is pointless, is just hilarious. So I guess.
Well, I mean, that's all I have to say about that. That's my reaction. There you go. That's the react video to the PhilPapers survey. I mean, the whole thing is fascinating to see what philosophers think. But those were my comments for the views that I had comments on. So there you go. That's all. Goodbye.
All right. So we've done a response video thingy. That's good. Cool. All right. Peace out. See you guys later. Let me know what other videos you want. I'll probably do another one for the physics one eventually. If you got any suggestions on videos or debate topics, or you want to set up debates for me, that would be great. Go for it. Email me. Put vids you want debunked on the vids you want debunked section on Discord. The Discord link is right down there in the bottom right. Join the Discord to send me debates and questions and stuff.